Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to start the opening ceremony. Please proceed to the conference room and take your seats. Thank you. To our dear participants who are present at the ballroom, after the panel discussion, please raise your name, place card, or your hand if you have any question. For online participants, you can use the chat box in Zoom to raise a question. Thank you for the kind attention. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 13th Ocean Dialogue, Teams Exploring New Frontier of the High and Deep Sea, co-organized by the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and Conrad Adenauer Department Vietnam. I would like to invite Dr. Nguyễn Hùng Sơn, Vice President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, come to the stage and deliver the opening remarks. Dr. Nguyễn Hùng Sơn, please.
Well, a very good morning to all of you. Dear Mr. Florent Paraben, resident representative of the Conrad Adenauer Stiftung in Vietnam. Ms. Mai Văn Phụng, Deputy Director of the Department of External Affairs of Cần Thơ City. representatives from the diplomatic corps in Vietnam, speakers, moderators, and participants to the 13th Ocean Dialogue, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On 19th of June 2023, the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, or BBNJ agreement, was adopted and became the third implementing agreement of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The main objective of the BBNJ agreement is to conserve and sustainably use the marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction through international cooperation and coordination. Despite the great challenges of reconciling differences between developed and developing countries on resource access and benefit sharing in areas beyond national jurisdiction, the international community was still able to overcome together all obstacles to come to the final agreement. On this great achievement, I would like to congratulate Her Excellency Ms. Rena Lee, Singapore Ambassador for Oceans and Law of the Sea Issues and President of the United Nations Intergovernmental Conference on the BBNJ Agreement, for her achievement. We have the great honor of having Ambassador Rena Lee participating and delivering her keynote at our conference later today. The adoption of the agreement marked an important milestone in the development of the awareness of mankind. For the first time, the world sought to protect living resources in areas where they have not yet able to exploit commercially. The change of mindset from exploiting first to conserving first is a great leap forward. Another important achievement is that developing countries have been able to participate fully in the negotiation process of the draft text. As a result, their development needs, especially those of small islands, developing countries, and least developed countries, have been well reflected in the final agreement. Vietnam has always expressed very strong support to the BBNJ agreement and was one of the first signatories of the agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, for a pioneering international instrument like this, implementation would not be easy nor straightforward. We can already foresee a number of challenges that lie ahead. For example, how we can balance between the BBNJ agreement and the existing regime of seabed mining. How can we have all relevant countries to agree on the establishments of marine protected areas in areas beyond national jurisdiction? And in this case, in the case we can, how can we then ensure the effective enforcement of conservation rules in these remote areas? And most relevant to us, how we can ensure a fair and effective participation of developing countries in the implementation of the BBNJ agreement. It is for these very reasons that the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam would like to dedicate the third Ocean Dialogue to the topic of exploring new frontiers of the high and deep seas, to ready ourselves to the new reality before it takes shape. Specifically, we would like to raise public awareness about existing framework and update regulations governing the areas beyond national jurisdiction. We assess the opportunities and challenges with regard to cooperation in exploration and preservation in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and suggest legal and policy recommendations for countries to promote potential partnership for governing the deep seas and the high seas. We therefore hope that this dialogue will help all stakeholders, not only policymakers, but also the public, better comprehend different provisions of the BBNJ agreement. We also hope to foster a common understanding between scientists, lawyers, and practitioners about the agreements and its important role. This common understanding is critical for Southeast Asian countries to move forward in their preparation for the implementations of the agreement. Let's not forget that most countries in this region are still developing countries and have little or no expertise to the deep seas and the high seas. Last but not least, we hope that the dialogue could help provide recommendations for developing new cooperation and partnerships both in Southeast Asia and beyond, for sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity resources in area beyond national jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the entry into force of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or the 1982 UNCLOS. The fact that the BBNJ is the third agreement to implement UNCLOS shows that UNCLOS is still the most important legal framework to govern all human activities in the ocean. As such, I would like to seize this opportunity to reaffirm the primordial importance of UNCLOS as the constitution of the ocean, which serves as the beacon guiding our action, both in area under national jurisdiction and those beyond national jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, I would not close my remark without my words of appreciation and thanks. First, to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung of Vietnam, the co-organizer of this event, as well as many other great events at the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. I would also like to thank the People's Committee of Cần Thơ City for their assistance and facilitation, and for hosting our event in this beautiful city in the heart of the Mekong Delta. My thank also goes to the moderators and speakers and role players for their active participation and roles today. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants who are present here in this room, as well as online today. Your presence, whether physical or virtual, are the success of this event. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to declare that the 13th Ocean Dialogue on Exploring New Frontiers of the High and Deep Sea now officially started. And now I would like to invite our co-organizer, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and my friend Florian Ferreira-Bent to come to the stage for his opening remarks. Florian, please come.
Had to remove the little box here, otherwise I would look too tall. I'm not particularly tall for a German. People would mistake me maybe for a Dutch speaker then. Yeah, dear Dr. Nguyen Hung Son, Vice President of the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, representative of the Department of Foreign Affairs of Cần Thơ City, representatives of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps to Vietnam, distinguished panelists, guests, esteemed guests and friends. Also on behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, you see the logo behind me, the co-organizer that was already mentioned a couple of times, a very warm welcome here to the already 13th iteration of the Oceans Dialogue, here in the vibrant city of Cần Thơ, in the middle of the Mekong Delta. While we are not at the sea or anywhere near the high seas, or for that matter, the deep sea, we are nevertheless surrounded by water, the waterways of the mighty Mekong. Any of you who have questions about the choice of the locations, please address those questions to Hung Sen or Lan An. But I think it's an excellent place to convene here, and I thank the Cần Thơ People's Committee for the hospitality of hosting us here today. It was already mentioned, and you can see it also behind me, the 13th iteration of the Oceans Dialogue. So it was in 2017 that the series was started as one of the most significant events in the cooperation between the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and the KAS, or Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, the foundation that I'm representing. I would therefore first like to extend my sincere thanks to the organizer, the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, a strategic or comprehensive strategic partner of ours, as well as very personally to Dr. Nguyen Hung Son, Dr. Lan An, and the Bien Dong or South China Sea Institute team who made this maritime-related events, including the Oceans Dialogue, but also the South China Sea Conference that we recently hosted in Ha Long, such a successful cooperation. And Hung Sen, you already mentioned the relevance of UNCLOS, as I would call it, the constitution of the sea. So at this point, I would also like to mention that Vietnam, for the very first time, nominated a judge for ITLOS, the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea. And it's no less than Professor Lan An, who is nominated and who will run for that position in June 26. And I wish her the greatest success. And I think all of you should provide her the endorsement that is necessary. Before I proceed, please allow me also to briefly introduce the foundation that I'm representing, the KAS, because some of you might not be familiar with us. KAS is a German political foundation named after the first German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer, and we are fostering democracy, the rule of law, and sustainable development worldwide. We work in over 120 countries, supporting good governance, civic participation, and international cooperation in various sectors. As a political foundation, we are affiliated with the party of former Chancellor Angela Merkel. And as some of you might have heard, we will have early elections, snap elections in February. So I can also say related to the future Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz. Here in Vietnam, we have been present and active for the last 31 years, working very closely with government agencies, academic institutions, and civil society organizations to promote the rule of law. And that includes, of course, international rule of law, foreign and security affairs, as well as socio-economic development. One of the core pillars of our mission here in Vietnam is to foster regional and international cooperation and integration. By connecting Vietnam with global best practices and policy dialogues, we contribute to the country's sustainable development in the context of an increasingly interconnected world. As a key partner in these efforts, we have the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam at our side, with whom we have a long-standing and fruitful relationship. Together with the DAV, we have conducted numerous joint events, seminars, and training programs aimed at advancing diplomacy, strategic studies, and foreign and policy dialogue here in Vietnam. I already mentioned the South China Sea International Conference in addition to the Oceans Dialogue. Dear participants, today we gather here at a pivotal time for ocean governance and sustainable development. The year holds special significance. We have already heard that from Hung Sen, as we mark the 30th anniversary of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, coming into effect in 1994. It is a foundation that continues to guide our collaborative efforts in protecting our oceans and promoting peace, prosperity, and sustainability. And Hung Sen already emphasized it's a breathing and living constitutional framework for the management of the ocean, because now we have already the BBNJ agreement signed last year. And this recent adoption of the BBNJ agreement is a testament, in my opinion, to the international community's commitment to safeguarding marine biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. This achievement reflects that our shared dedication to fostering multilateralism and ensuring a balance between exploration and conservation, a balance that is increasingly crucial as we look to the high and deep seas for solutions to pressing challenges. Germany, the country that I am from, that my foundation is from, was among the first signatories to sign the BBNJ agreement. The current federal government approved the signing on September 13th, 2023, so a little bit more than a year ago. And the agreement was signed later, a week later exactly, by the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Germany's proactive stance and early signing of the BBNJ agreement underscores its dedication to international cooperation and the sustainable use of marine resources. Well, of course, I also have to admit that currently it has not completed the ratification process, but this in fact also holds true for Vietnam, which was one of the first signatories as well, but where ratification is also still outstanding. Today's dialogue will explore these new frontiers of the high and deep seas, bringing together perspectives from across the globe. We look forward to rich discussions on deep sea mining, marine biodiversity, and the path towards collaborative governance in the areas beyond national jurisdiction. This dialogue is not only a platform to exchange knowledge, but also an opportunity to forge new partnerships and lay the groundwork for future policies that will shape our oceans' health and the resilience for generations to come. On behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and our partner, the DAV, I thank you all for your participation in advance and your dedication to this vital cause. Let us make this dialogue a step forward in securing a sustainable and peaceful future of our oceans. Thank you very much.
Thank you for Dr. Nguyễn Hùng Sơn and Mr. Florian for your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will begin the first session, unpacking the new BBNJ agreement, key contents and prospects. It's my pleasure to invite Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Thị Lan Anh, Director General of ISTE Institute, to be the moderator. Participating in this panel discussion, I am delighted to welcome our speaker, Dr. Maria Rowena Iguer, the La Salle University, Philippines. Associate Professor Dr. Hami Rusli, University Saint Islam, Malaysia. Dr. Trần Thị Ngọc Sương, University of Da Nang, Vietnam. And last but not least, Dr. Sarah Lo Thiện, University of Wollongong, Australia. Dr. Lan Anh, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, MC. Good morning to all our distinguished guests and participants. Like in 2017, actually on the December 24th, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to officially convene the negotiation of the BBNJ agreement. It's been 5 years for the negotiation, and we all overcome the COVID time for some disruption. But at the end, we all come to the end that we have a new agreement, which is the third implementation agreement of UNCLOS, and it's open for signature and ratification at the moment. So I'm delighted to have here in section 1 all the experts and specialists on the new BBNJ agreement. They will address in turn different content, key contents, and provide that comments on the progress of implementation of the BBNJ agreement. And I hope that throughout all the section, we will unpack the main content and will try to discuss the forward-looking for the prospect of the new agreement. So first of all, for the first speakers, we're going to have Dr. Maria Rowena Iguer from the La Salle University of Philippines. Dr. Iguer holds a PhD in agriculture science in the fish population genetics from Tohoku University, Japan. But more important, she also served as a scientist advisor for the Philippine government in the UN meeting on the issue related to maritime genetic resources and aquatic biodiversity. So with her rich expertise, she will address the topic on genetic resources and digital sequences, one of the main content of the new BBNJ agreement. So without further ado, the floor is now Dr. Iguer.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I hope I don't bore you with the science stuff, but I think it's quite important to understand what we're trying to protect, conserve, and manage. So let me just proceed with my presentation, recognizing the value of marine genetic resources in the context of the BBNJ agreement. I think I must mention that I've worked for the longest time at the Southeast Asian Fisheries Development Center, which allowed me to really be involved in talks regarding MGRs. Okay, yeah. So by definition in the treaty or in the agreement, MGRs or marine genetic resources have been defined as any material living organism, be it plant, animal, or microorganisms that would have functional units of heredity. If you recall your basic biology, it's focusing on the genes, and these genes would have actual or potential value. Okay, so but amongst marine biologists, conservationists, people who work in science, the definition remains the same, but the key point that we have to focus on is the value of the resource as it plays a role in keeping the ocean food chain sustainable. And it is mainly for the benefit of humankind. So we have to make sure that we are able to monitor that aspect. Okay, so just to go through the different applications of MGRs. First, let me tackle the non-commercial application, which essentially is the task of scientists, that is to look at the biodiversity aspect of the marine resources. So from our end, we look at what species are there. Now we can afford to do all of those things, by way of molecular DNA analysis. So even if we just sample like the organism itself, get tissues, invasive sampling, we can also look at the environment. So now we have that method we call eDNA. That is, we just collect water samples and do not harm whatever it is that is found in the environment. But the main purpose of that is to identify the species that are found in such habitats, mainly for taxonomic research. And secondly, do ecological surveys, looking at the health of the marine environment, and also in the process to manage the species that are being supported by such environments. Yeah. So so far as the commercial application is concerned, resources that are coming from the sea, mainly the genetic resources, they have varied applications from fisheries, medical, industrial, and I think the most important thing is the pharmaceutical part of it. We get to discover drugs by using MGRs as the raw material for drug discovery. Okay, so just a few examples of what those are. I would point out 6 examples. Okay, so like the first example, there would be a crab. It would have blood that can be used for detecting endotoxins or poisons. Second would be bacteria we call Thermus aquaticus, which are found in the deep sea. So these are found in hydrothermal vents. The main importance of those organisms is that now we can afford to do DNA amplification, which is a key method in trying to study genes, their expression, whatever products can be derived from the expression of those genes. So it's part of a standard protocol. And so with that organism, jellyfish, no, we get to derive the green fluorescent protein, which is essential in recombinant DNA technology work. On the other hand, we also find, these are just a few examples. We have the lugworm, which can be used as an oxygen carrier. The red seaweed, which has bioactive compounds, we call lectins, that can be effective against viruses. And we've experienced of late, like we've had problems with the coronavirus. So it's really important to define and utilize such resources for the purpose of serving whatever or solving whatever problems we have and we've encountered in the past. So the other example would be the sponge. So it also has a lot of bioactive compounds, especially used in anti-leukemia as a drug. Research, as you can see from the slide, started way back 1969, and it also contains some compounds that can be used against viruses. Okay, so the word marine, the marine genetic resources, as discussed in the BBNJ Treaty, they've expanded the definition. There's a broad sense definition of MGRs. For us, actually, it's just the sample organism itself. But then again, I think the several definitions would encompass all of the possible uses of the MGRs. So another definition would be the genes itself. If you recall your basic biology, it's the DNA that we are able to also utilize the important information coming from such database. And we now identify what we call as DSI, or digital sequence information. Now we have the technology wherein we can define the genetic background of organisms, including us humans. There's this Human Genome Project, in fact, that was completed. And now it helps us in trying to find out reasons why we get sick and why those illnesses could be caused by genetic causes. Okay, so this illustration, this is basically what is generated from a DNA sequencer. So if you can visualize, the sequence is simply single letter codes, no, representing nucleotides of the DNA. So if you are familiar with the 4 nucleotide bases, it's that series. You see the peaks on top, but the bottom part there would be the sequence itself. So those are, yeah, if you strictly, you simplify things, it would be like chemical molecules, right? Okay, so this information that you can see on the slide is in October 2017, and it tallies mainly all the marine species with sequences. On the left, you see there are around 862 species that has been documented with sequences. And those sequences would total 13,000, no? The diagram you see on the right. So a huge number. In fact, there's still some more being done. And now we can have a clearer picture of what we have in nature in the marine environment. This slide would show us the different types of information that can be obtained when we do DNA work. So first off, like if you want to characterize a particular species, in this case, marine genetic resources, we start off with characterizing what you see physically. We call that phenotype data. The species identification, that is for taxonomical purposes. Ecological, meaning what this species would require when they're found in the environment, the conditions that should be there for them to thrive. And then in the middle, you find DSI, which is used for several types of research, from metagenomic research to proteomic research. All of these are current advancements in the field of genetics. No, and I think later you'll find out that the developing states are not really behind researches that are being done along this line. And so the applications of those information can be had in industrial biotechnology, synthetic biology. I would like to point this out. Synthetic biology is a new field of science wherein you can develop or produce products without really getting samples from the actual organism, but knowing the sequence. And then you can produce whatever bioactive compounds that particular organism produces, which is why DSI has become part of the definition of the MGRs. Okay, so this is just a collage of pictures. Yeah, sorry, that's me maybe more than a decade ago. I've been doing work on population genetics together with a Japanese laboratory where I got my PhD. So they allow me to go there frequently to do analyses. I just bring money for the reagents in view of the fact that we do not have the equipment back home. But currently now we already are able to invest on that. In fact, you see the picture on top, the Philippine Genome Center. It has been established maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. We have 3 of those all over the country, and it has helped a lot in us addressing the problem of COVID. And then on the right top of the screen, you find different industries that provide inputs. They're biotech companies. And so all of the other sciences, as well as described below, genomics, bioinformatics, proteomics, they become an integral part in understanding MGRs. The slide in the middle shows us a database. It's one of several databases which hold information on the sequences of whatever organism there might be, of whatever protein sequences you might need. So it's all there. So if you have a species that is unidentified, you can simply input the sequence and it will be aligned with the sequence that is known, and you can get to identify that particular sample that you might have collected. Okay, so MGRs can be obtained through 4 means. First, in situ, that is getting the molecules from freshly sampled organisms or maybe preserved tissues from live organisms. Ex situ, that is getting the molecules from organisms that you get to maintain in captivity or in conditions outside of the natural habitat, but you get to simulate those conditions. In vitro, this is done by culturing cells itself using genetically manipulated organisms and allowing expression of the hereditary material, which is the DNA. And in silico, it's basically just using the digital sequence information, just getting the data of the sequence of those bases. And you can create proteins and other important products. Okay, so it's a no-brainer, no? We have the Earth is composed of 71% water, 29% land. So really, we have to protect our resources in the marine habitats. On the right of the screen, you find a database. It's one of several. It's a registry of marine species. So let me just bring you to that page. It contains a lot of information on marine organisms. It's like a catalog. You find a list of studies. You can go through papers that would have provided information on those species, and it's being updated regularly as long as new information comes in. So what it contains are the accepted marine species. As you can see from the tally, to date there are about 246,000 of those marine species. Their names are included there, about 500,000 of them. And also, of course, citations to papers that have generated all of those information. Okay, so we all know that not all of the species are mainly found in the ABNJ, but several of those are shared. They're commonly found as well in the exclusive economic zones of coastal states. No? Okay, so moving forward to the deep sea, as you may have noted, it's a bit difficult to get samples from the deep sea, but there have been studies, and we're looking forward to knowing more about the organisms that are found there at. In the deep sea, we know there's high pressure, it's very warm, it's dark, but I was lucky enough to be able to visit JAMSTEC. And JAMSTEC is a research agency in Japan, which deals with a lot of studies on the deep sea environments. So I managed to go there in 1999. So as far back as 1999, they already have samples of organisms that can just be drawn from the deep sea. I've seen eyeless crabs. They've already also, I think, sampled algae that are found, microorganisms that are found in the deep sea, and they simulate the environment that they're in, and they're now culturing them in the lab. So I don't know how far they've gone with the research, but in 1999, they came out with this book, Extremophiles in Deep Sea Environment. So it's quite useful in the sense that, of course, we have to know a lot about what is also found in the deep sea. Recently, I tried to check whatever information there could be on those deep sea organisms, and I found this record on fauna coming from the Galapagos Reef. I forgot to mention that the Japanese studied a lot of the organisms in the Marianas Trench. So we were looking towards discovering more of those specimens. Okay, just a matter of interest perhaps. No? Why do we need to study those organisms? This is an actual example, although I think the cone snail that was studied, it was studied by Filipino scientists. If you know a drug known as siconotide, it's an anti-pain drug, and it's commercially being produced by Prialt, a French drug company. So both Dr. Baldomero Oliveira, he's an American-based Filipino scientist, while Dr. Lourdes Cruz, she's one of our national scientists. They both work on it. The product was approved in the US in 2004. But sadly, none of them, even the Philippines, benefited by way of royalties coming from the patented product. And I think the reason for that is like scientists from way back in the Philippines are not too conscious of the fact that they needed to have those discoveries patented. Yeah, another kind of drug which was drawn from the deep sea this time, it's an anti-cancer drug called trabectedin. It's a marine anti-cancer drug coming from sea squirts. So a lot of those can be obtained if we just push through with research on those types of organisms. Okay, just to show you how costly it might be doing research in the deep sea or in the field, for instance, like you can see all of those pictures of those vessels which they use for research. Yeah. So countries like US, Canada, Japan, they're all well into it because they can afford to do the work. So this would be a summary of whatever patents they've had for and patent applications they've had for marine organisms whose genes they've already worked on. And Seas-Eng, I'm happy to report, although they're not really that many, is already starting to do the same. So Indonesia is leading the pack with about 29 patent applications. Okay, so I think I'm down to the last few slides. So the BBNJ agreement, in essence, I think it was mentioned that the main objective is for conservation and sustainable use of the resource in the ABNJ. And the specific aims is to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits, promote capacity building, conduct MSRs or marine scientific research, and develop and transfer marine technology. Inclusions, of course, there have been previous work. So even before the entry into force of the agreement, everybody has to inform, no? The BBNJ treaty rather would cover all of those done before the agreement was can be put into force and afterwards. Exclusions would be fishing or fish species that are already covered by other laws, for instance, for tuna and all the other species that we know of that are under the international laws. So in the agreement, there's also what we call as the access and benefit sharing. I think somebody else will do a thorough explanation of what ABS would be, but it basically has to be pegged on equal opportunities in carrying MSR. In situ collection should be with due regard for the interests of all coastal states. And there's that provision that it has to, all parties are bound to cooperate with due consideration of the clearinghouse mechanism that is established under the treaty. There would be non-monetary benefits. I think it has been pointed out in the slides, access to samples, to DSI, scientific data, information on the notifications and the identifiers of the samples that have been collected, technology transfer, capacity building, scientific cooperation, which the developing states really need, and other benefits. Monetary, I think, yeah, it's quite self-explanatory. There should be a financial mechanism under that agreement. And then finally, yeah, so this is my last slide. The treaty has been formulated to enable all countries to harness and sustainably use MGRs from both high and deep seas with the main principle of the common heritage of mankind in mind. So I hope through this dialogue, we will be able to achieve such and maybe convince all the other countries. It needs to be ratified by 60 states before the agreement's entry into force. So I hope I covered everything. And I would like to thank our organizers of this meeting, the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for the chance to be able to be a part of this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Romana Iguna, for the very insight presentation. So for the first time, with the new BBNJ agreement, we can see that marine genetic resources were formally recognized as a resource, and together with the digital sequence information, it is provide the legal framework for, like she said, the asset, the sharing, equitable sharing of all the resources, and more important, it will facilitate the collection, the database of all the species that related to the marine genetic resources and the digital sequence information in a kind of big database of the world. We hope that in the future, with those legal framework, we will have the sustainable use of the new resources for the benefit of all the mankind in the world. And with that, we move to the second speakers. Our second speaker will be Professor Dr. Hamid Rusli. Dr. Hamid Rusli is an associate professor lecturer at the Faculty of Sharia and Law, University of Saint Islam, Malaysia, and a member of Malaysia Bar. He's a visiting scholar in a number of countries, including Russia, China, and Australia. He's also used to be the Lieutenant Commander of the Royal Malaysian Navy and volunteer in the reserve team. And he will deliver the topic touch upon another main content of the new BBNJ agreement, which is the area-based management tools. Is with the reference to the deep sea mining without rules. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Dr. Haslin Trusley.
Hello, Xin Chao, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. An, for the generous introduction. I am being asked by the organizers, so I forgot to thank the organizers, DAV and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Thank you so much for having me here. And I've been asked by the organizer to speak about ABMT, area-based management tools, and I will be talking more on marine protected areas, and is the deep sea mining, the prospective deep sea mining will be done without rules. Let us have a look here. And that's me. Okay, I don't have to introduce myself because Dr. An has done that, but to make sure that I'm genuine, so you can compare myself with the photo on the screen. Okay, so this is where I work, University Science Islam Malaysia, the nearest public university to the international airport. So since we have known each other, if you come to Malaysia, please do visit my university. It's just a stone's throw away from the international airport. And this is the content of my presentation today. It looks long, but it's not going to be that. I will not take too much of your time. And okay, when we talk about deep sea mining, Dr. Rowena has explained a lot on marine genetic resources, and whereby what I'm going to do today is to explain to you why there is a need to have ABMT should mining has started, maybe in the next couple of years, maybe in the near future, we do not know. But at the rate where the exploration work is ongoing at the moment, I think it will not be too long in the future. Okay, so deep sea mine, in the past, usually resources are being obtained from land base. Now it's moving towards the deep seabed. And the ISA, International Seabed Authority, regulates and controls all minerals-related activities in the international seabed by issuing license. But as of July 2024, which is a couple of months ago, only exploratory licenses have been issued by the ISA with no commercial scale deep sea mining operations yet. And if you see, why is it important to discuss about deep sea mining and its impact? Because it will impact the planet. And if you look at the slide that I'm showing to you now, the impact would be loss of substrate, seafloor compaction, and it will cause habitat removal when the deep seabed is being mined, and it will affect not only the marine life but the planet as a whole. That's why this is a matter to be discussed by the whole world, by the world community. That's why the world community has come together, and on 20th September 2023. The High Seas Treaty or the BBNJ agreement is open for signature. And this treaty could assist in protecting the ocean from possible environmental degradation caused by DSM activities in the mining of those minerals that I've stated there. And this treaty, it allows for the creation of ABMT and through marine protected areas. And these marine protected areas have to be submitted to COP, the Conference of the Parties. And this treaty established a decision-making body, which is known as the Conference of the Parties, a scientific and technical body, a secretariat, and other committees and a mechanism to carry out specific functions. And what is ABMT? ABMT is basically an area that has specific management tools to protect it from further degradation because of the activities that has been carried out in that particular area and its vicinity. And the High Seas Treaty comes into play an important role here, whereby it ensures that the protection will be done not in a fragmented way. Okay, the high seas and without the treaty, the high seas and deep seabed beyond national jurisdiction will be governed in a fragmented way. So this is what the High Seas Treaty is going to address. And the High Seas Treaty seeks to change this by establishing a new framework that can collectively allow states to work together with new ABMT. And this ABMT could be in the form of marine protected areas and related measures. And what is marine protected areas, MPAs? Many countries have already established MPAs in their respective territory, maritime territory. So MPA in areas beyond national jurisdiction is something like that, but it's not within a maritime zones of that particular coastal state. It will be in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And MPA proposals to the COP, the Conference of Parties, must include a draft management plan encompassing the proposed measures and outlining proposed monitoring, research and review activities to achieve the specified objectives. And okay, this is the flow, how the proposal is to be done. First, the proposal has to be sent to COP, and then there will be a number of deliberations by stakeholders, by the relevant organization authorities, and proponents may revise proposal based on inputs to COP. And at the end of the day, if everyone agrees to it, this has not happened yet, but maybe in the near future, COP establishes the MPA in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Okay, and there are three management scenarios this MPA could take form in. Number one would be MPA, which no dedicated management body. Okay, so it will be like business as usual. And secondly, a centralized management model, like what we have, IMO has PSSA, particularly sensitive sea area, and special areas under MAPOL, and a decentralized model with one management body per MPA. So each MPA will have their own decentralized model. So which one will prevail? This has not happened yet, but based on what has been done by maritime organization all around the world, or by the IMO itself, I think scenario 2 would be the most suitable model, whereby it will be governed by a body to monitor whether or not this area has been associated protective measures for the area has been properly executed. Okay, the challenges would be, obviously, is it easy? Would it be easy to make countries work together, like what has been mentioned by many scholars? Would it be easy to make sure countries work together to come up with one areas or a number of areas to be designated as MPA in areas beyond national jurisdiction? Okay, so, and in areas within national jurisdiction, sometimes can also cause controversial. For instance, when Australia designated or extended the Great Barrier Reef PSSA into Torres Strait, they introduced what we call as they introduced what is being called as Torres Strait PSSA. And these are the PSSA that is located all over the world. The newest one was Northwestern Mediterranean Sea with voluntary speed reduction as its APM, associated protective measure. To Bataha Reefs, areas to be avoided. Torres Strait with compulsory pilotage. When Australia introduced compulsory pilotage in its outer route in the Great Northeastern Channel, it invites a lot of opposition by other maritime states, particularly Singapore and United States. So this is an example of ABMT that has received opposition. Okay, so that was about more than a decade ago. A couple of years ago, Malaysia wanted to designate Kukut Island in the south part of Straits of Malacca near Singapore as PSSA. But this was again rejected, opposed by Indonesia. I'm sorry, this is in Indonesian language, but it is translated up there. Indonesia rejected Malaysia's PSSA proposal in 2017 because there is an issue of overlapping maritime claims that have not been resolved in that particular area. So this is just on marine protect or ABMT within national jurisdiction. There will be a lot of challenges, a lot of opposition. What more in areas beyond national jurisdiction? So that is the challenges. Okay, that is one of the challenges, and it also remains to be seen how nations might work together for the establishment of MPA beyond national jurisdiction. Exploration work is ongoing at the moment, and it's not cheap. Okay, in the COP, for instance, okay, different stakeholders have different views, have different interests. They want to protect their own interests, and at the end of the day, it will take time for the proposal to be accepted. But this remains to be seen. But at the moment, as exploration work is ongoing, contractors are expected to follow the best environmental practices in order to ensure that mining activities will not entirely impact our planet. Okay. In conclusion, as seabed exploration are now ongoing, but mining is not has yet to start. Contractors, scientists, legal experts, and the authority must continuously work together to monitor and to anticipate the environmental impacts. I see that my time is up. Can I be given 20 seconds? Thank you. Okay, so with more scientific data, then it's only then we can come up with the most sustainable way to balance marine mining activities in the deep seabed and the protection of the marine environment. And as far as let's say if the marine protected area affects shipping, it has to go through IMO, and the COP must include IMO. For instance, here there may be a need for IMO to attend COP as an observer, or conversely, there is also a need for COP Secretariat to have a consultative status at IMO, because we have to work together in order to ensure ABMT to create MPA to work. If not, nothing can be done. And in my final remark, deep sea mining is inevitable, but it's certainly not without rules. Rules have to be made in order to ensure we can live together in this planet without much problem, or we have to make sure our planet is suitable for future generations. Thank you so much. I'm returning the floor back to Dr. An. Thank you. Come in.
Well, thank you so much. You gave us a lot of thinking how to overcome all the challenges in order to establish all the ABMTs, including the marine protected area, especially the rule to govern the deep seabed mining that I'm sure that we have enough experts over there to deal later. But at the moment, because the conference of the party were trust with the authority to approve with the consensus of all MBDTs. So it clearly, we don't know how it works in the future. We treasure your suggestion for a number of cooperation among the existing organization and mechanism, including the IMO, for more efficient management in the future. And I hope that is something that country in the region is really interested, because at the end of the day, how to establish MBDTs, including MPA, is very important to achieve the goal of the new agreement, BBJJ, in order to conserve and sustainably develop all the resources at the ABMBGs. All right, we're gonna move forward with our third speaker, which is Dr. Trần Thị Ngọc Sương. Dr. Trần Thị Ngọc Sương is a lecturer at the Faculty of International Studies, University of Da Nang, Vietnam. She has written widely on the legal aspect of BBNJ agreement, implementation of the BBNJ agreement, and particularly Vietnam participation in the process of negotiating and concluding the BBNJ agreement. So the floor is yours now, Dr. Sương.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyễn Thị Lan Anh. First of all, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the KRS and also the DIV for giving me an opportunity to be here to share what I know about the BBNJ agreement in general and the environmental impact assessment in particular. So I would like to move straight forward to the environmental assessment in the BBNJ agreement. Yes, we know that last year in September, the BBNJ agreement was signed, and it marked a historic achievement of human beings in the development of rules and procedures to conserve and to sustainable use of BBNJ. And so far, we have 105 signatories and 14 parties to the agreement. And so the agreement assessed 4 key elements, and environmental impact assessment is enshrined in part 4. And we know that UNCLOS has set general rules so that the marine environment can be assessed. But the BBNJ agreement, as an implementing agreement of UNCLOS, has set details process, definition, objectives more specific, so that the environmental impact assessment might be made for planned activities in IBNJ. So in part 4, we have 4 key aspects. First of all, I would like to mention the definition and scope of the EIR, the environmental impact assessment. Actually, EMA is defined as a process to identify and to evaluate the potential impacts of an activity and to inform decision making. And also the BBNJ agreement, it mentioned the strategic environmental assessment, although it's not defined, but it mentioned, SAR is conducted for plans and programs relating to activities under jurisdiction or control. And the agreement also mentioned cumulative impacts. And actually, the scope of the part 4 on EIA is broader because it covers the monitoring and review of activities after they are authorized. And but the agreement only apply to planned activity, and it have not retroactive application to activities already authorized before or underway before the agreement comes into force. And so the importance of EIAs is to ensure that human activities are assessed to prevent, mitigate, and manage significant impacts, or to contribute to the whole BBNJ objectives and enable states to make informed decisions or to promote transparency and stakeholder engagement. And this is the objective of the agreement in relation to environmental impact assessment. And it's emphasized the support for developing countries because EIA process is very complicated, and it needs specific guidelines or rules so that developing countries may have more support to implement. In the agreement, obligation to conduct EIAs can be divided into 2 forms, 2 kinds of activities. Activities which are planned in areas within national jurisdiction, and the second one in IBNJ. So with planned activities in area within national jurisdiction, which may cause substantial pollution of or significant and harmful change to the environment in IBNJ. So this kind of activities may be conducted EIA under Part 4 or under a national process. And for planned activities in IBNJ, the agreement set more specific rules and process, such as screening, scoping, assessment and evaluation, and then monitoring, reporting, and review. And for activities planned within national jurisdiction, and it is worth noting that if a state party determine that an EIA is conducted under national process, it must ensure that the monitoring of that planned activity is conducted under national process and make relevant information, reports, and monitoring available to the public through the clearinghouse mechanism. And for planned activities in IBNJ, the agreement set threshold factors, process, and decision making. So what are the thresholds? Why UNCLOS has set more threshold at, for example, when a state party determine that or have reasonable ground to believe that the the plant activity may cause substantial pollution to the environment. It have to be met the impact assessment. But the threshold for EIA in the BBNJ agreement use a more than minor transitory standard as a trigger for screening process to determine whether a full EIA is needed. It means that if we set a low threshold, it means that more activity needs to be conducted EIA, and if we set a higher threshold, it means less activity. So in the negotiation, some states say that BBNJ agreement as an implementing of UNCLOS had to use the same threshold as UNCLOS, but some others say that no, the BBNJ agreement must set a low threshold. So that and finally the BBNJ agreement use the reconciled compromise, and it say that when a plant activity may have more than a minor or transitory effect on the marine environment, or the effects of the activity are unknown or poorly understood, the party with jurisdiction or control of the activity shall conduct a screening of the activity. Just the screening, not the conducting. The conducting of EIA is later. So what are the factors of screening and conducting? Two separate steps. Screening is used to determine if the threshold is met, and factors after the screening if the party determine that the potential impacts of the activity is meets the threshold, and then they continue to conduct the EIA. So the factors of screening is a non-exhaustive list, such as the time of technology, the duration, the location, characteristic, etc. And the conducting is more demanding. It's at a minimum some a lot of information, description of the activity, result, baseline assessment, etc. And the detailed process for EIAs have 4 steps: the screening, as I mentioned before, the scoping, the impact assessment and evaluation, the prevention, mitigation, and management. And also after the first step, we have the second one, the monitoring, reporting, and review. So the decision maker is belong to the state party. It will determine whether EIA is required for that plant activity and whether that plant activity is allowed to proceed following an IEI. And it allows other party to register their views on the potential impacts of the activity if the party made the determination that EIA is not required. And other party may register their concern with the scientific and technological body under the agreement. And in both cases, the STB may make recommendation. And the last one I want to mention, the relationship with other relevant instrument frameworks and bodies concerning the EIA. The cooperation is very important, so that it is consistent with the agreement that the agreement is not not undermine other relevant instruments. So we have 3. I made here 3 cooperation model for the cooperation between the BBNJ agreement and other IFB. The conference of parties is required to develop a mechanism for STB to collaborate with IFB in developing detailed standards and guidelines for the conduct of EIA. And also relevant global, regional, sub-regional, and several bodies are among the stakeholders expressly identified as having an interest in the consultation process. And the last one, EIA process under agreement is unnecessary if potential impacts have been assessed and addressed in accordance with other relevant instrument or framework and bodies, provided that assessment is equivalent to the one in Part 4 and all the standard applied where designed to prevent, mitigate, or set a potential impact is below the threshold in Part 4. So it is important that the Conference of Parties and other relevant instrument frameworks and bodies have also must have regular interaction so that can lead to the success of the EIA procedure. And lastly, there's my conclusion. While UNCLOS contain obligations relating to the assessment of the impact activities on the environment and the BBNJ agreement set out a procedure framework within which EIA must be conducted, including the specification of screening test flows, consultation requirements, and a minimum information that must be conducted on EIA reports. It will address challenges both by the lack of specificity and application of UNCLOS in a consistent way to a variety of activities taking place in ABNG, where such activity were not covered by a specific regulatory regime. So this is my presentation. Thank you for your attention and welcome on comments and remarks. Questions? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Seas-Eng, for your detailed presentation on the environmental impact assessment. For the goals of the BBNJ agreement, which is try to protect the biodiversity in the area beyond the jurisdiction of the Kota State. Really, how to assess the impact, environmental impact is very important topic. And really, the new BBNJ agreement, like Dr. Seas-Eng just provided, has give us a detailed process, the threshold, the factors, the process, and the evaluation, how to conduct environmental impact assessment. And it will be a very good complementary for the obligation under UNCLOS. It addresses the minimum condition, it addresses the specificity and application of how to conduct the assessment. So it's really an important part of the new agreement, not only for the area beyond national jurisdiction, but also it's going to be an indicator for the assessment inside the jurisdiction, under jurisdiction of the Kota State. Thank you, Dr. Seas-Eng. And last but not least, we have Dr. Sarah Lothian. Dr. Sarah Lothian is a senior lecturer of an academic barrister at Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security, UNCLOS, at the University of Wollongong. Sarah decided to embark upon a career in academia after spending more than 12 years in the legal professions. She holds a PhD in law from University of Sydney and an MA degree in marine law with distinction from the University of Nottingham. We have an alumni just right next to me, another one. And Dr. Sarah's research interests include the protection of biodiversity beyond the national jurisdiction. So right on the topic, and bring to our discussion today, Sarah will share the topic, a very important topic of capacity building and marine technology transfer from the new BBNJ agreement. So Sarah, please.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's an absolute honour to be here, and I'd like to thank the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for inviting me along and to speak on my favourite element of the BBNJ package deal, capacity building and marine technology transfer. So the BBNJ agreement recognises that capacity building and the development and transfer of marine technology. Sorry, I'm just going to do my slides. I need to use the green button, I'm told. Okay. The BBNJ agreement recognises that capacity building and the development and transfer of marine technology is a critical cross-cutting element, and it will be indispensable to the implementation of the other elements of the package deal and to the overall objectives of the instrument. Now, as significant financial and technical resources are required to conduct and manage activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction, capacity limitations could constrain the ability of developing states from effectively participating in the BBNJ agreement. So to be effective, states need to be able to participate in and assume their responsibilities and obligations under the instrument. And this can only be achieved through the strengthening of capacity, especially for the Global South, through the transfer of technology, the sharing of research, training programs, and financial support. Now, UNCLOS recognises the differing ability of states to benefit from the ocean. And this is clearly evident in Part 14 of UNCLOS, which contains a normative framework for capacity building and technology transfer. And while Part 14 set out some really ambitious aspirations, its key provisions have gone largely unheeded. Now, aside from UNCLOS and its implementing agreements, the importance of capacity building has been underscored in global, regional, and sectorial instruments, frameworks, and bodies relevant to areas beyond national jurisdiction. To date, capacity building efforts have been mainly sectorial in nature and undertaken by a number of specialised agencies, including the FAO, the IMO, the ISA, and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. Now, although there has been considerable growth of capacity building activities in areas beyond national jurisdiction, overall, the number of activities remain quite limited, with many of these activities being part of broader training in ocean policy, governance, and science. There's also been a lack of cross-sectorial capacity development, which is actually key to improving integrated ocean management. So moving forward, I think we really need to start thinking about how the BBNJ agreement can improve cross-sectorial capacity development and also improve synergy among existing capacity building efforts. Now, while an existing architecture for capacity building was already in place prior to the adoption of the BBNJ agreement, like Part 14 of UNCLOS, gaps and ambiguities have weakened this architecture, and there has been limited implementation to date. Part 5 of the BBNJ agreement builds upon Part 14 of UNCLOS by setting out modalities and cooperative mechanisms and tools for the multilateral facilitation of capacity building and technology transfer. And so I thought I'd use my time to unpack Part 5 of the BBNJ agreement and how it goes about strengthening that normative framework that we already have in Part 14 of UNCLOS. But while my comments will focus on Part 5, it's really important to note that references to capacity building and technology transfer can be found scattered throughout the text, which again speaks to its cross-cutting nature. So the terms capacity building and technology transfer are not defined in UNCLOS, and they're not specifically defined in the BBNJ agreement. Under the new instrument, capacity building is understood as the creation or enhancement of the human, financial management, scientific, technological, organizational, institutional, and resource capabilities of parties. A definition of marine technology is provided in Article 1, which confirms that this term goes well beyond equipment to include information and data on marine sciences, as well as expertise, knowledge, skills, technical, scientific, and legal know-how, as well as analytical methods related to the conservation and sustainable use of BBNJ. And this broad definition arguably captures the multidisciplinary nature of BBNJ research and encompasses the full range of scientific and technological tools that could be required both onshore and at sea. Now, Article 44 and Annex 2 of the BBNJ agreement fills an important gap in the UNCLOS framework by setting out a non-exhaustive and lengthy list of capacity building and technology transfer activities and initiatives. And these activities and initiatives include, but are not limited to, those that you can see on this slide. Now, it's important to note that the Conference of the Parties will periodically review, assess, and further develop guidance on the types of capacity building and technology transfer. And that's in order to reflect technological progress and innovation, but also to respond and adapt to the evolving needs of states and regions. So Part 5 of the BBNJ agreement further strengthens Part 14 of UNCLOS by underpinning its obligations with a meaningful duty to cooperate. So Article 41 revitalises Article 266 of UNCLOS by setting out an explicit duty for state parties to cooperate either directly or through relevant instruments, frameworks, and bodies to assist parties, and in particular developing states, in achieving the objectives of the instrument through capacity building and technology transfer. And so Article 41 places a strict legal obligation on parties to cooperate to achieve this end, not cooperate to simply promote it, which is the case under Article 266 of UNCLOS. So while the agreement does not bind parties to specific forms of capacity building, developed states will be required to engage in capacity building initiatives and to cooperate in transferring marine technology to developing state parties. Article 41 is reinforced by Article 8, which specifically requires states to promote international cooperation in marine scientific research and in the development and transfer of technology. And this cooperation is to take place at all levels and in all forms, including through enhanced cooperation and coordination with existing international resource and governance regimes, as well as partnerships with relevant stakeholders, from the private sector to civil society, as well as Indigenous peoples and local communities and holders of traditional knowledge. And in giving effect to Part 5 of the agreement, parties will also be required to give full recognition to the special needs and requirements of developing states. And here I think it's really important to underscore the importance of regional cooperation and building a network of regional capacity building partners. A network of regional partners can share knowledge and find areas to collaborate to produce project synergies. It would also help to avoid duplication of existing capacity building efforts and hence maximize efficiency and efficacy. Now, aside from setting out a clear and unequivocal duty to cooperate, the BBNJ agreement supplements this duty with cooperative mechanisms and tools that also fill in gaps left behind in UNCLOS. So, for example, a main flaw of Part 14 is that its obligations are expressed in general terms and leave out important details on how capacity building and technology transfer can work in practice. Articles 42 and 43 of the BBNJ agreement fill this gap by elaborating upon the modalities for capacity building and technology transfer. So parties within their capabilities will be required to ensure capacity building for developing states and are to cooperate to achieve the transfer of marine technology to state parties that need and request it. Subject to their capabilities, parties will also be required to provide supporting resources and facilitate other sources of support to state parties that take into account the recipient's national policies, priorities, plans, and programs. So 2 things to note about these provisions. The first is that it acknowledges that different states are going to have different capabilities when it comes to capacity building. With that, capacity building efforts are to be country driven, and it will fall to each state to assess its own needs and priorities, either individually or with the assistance of the Capacity Building and Marine Technology Committee. And experience shows us the necessity of undertaking a careful needs-based assessment, as each state will have its own unique environmental, institutional, political, and capacity context to consider. Article 42 also stipulates that the support provided must build upon existing programs and policies and be guided by lessons learned in order to maximise efficiency where possible. Additional modalities are set out in Article 43, which contains a significant commitment. Pursuant to Article 43, state parties commit to share a long-term vision of the importance of fully realising technology development and transfer for inclusive, equitable and effective cooperation, and to participate in the activities undertaken under the BBNJ agreement in order to fully achieve its objectives. And so the key word here is long-term. We know from experience that effective capacity building and technology transfer initiatives and projects require long-term engagement, dialogue, and relations. Now, in terms of technology transfer, the agreement promotes fair and most favourable terms, including concessional and preferential terms for developing countries, whilst recognising at the same time the rights and interests of technology holders. So parties must promote economic and legal conditions that facilitate transfers, including the provision of incentives to enterprises and institutions. Modalities in the agreement ensure that parties are not forced to hand over technology, and the rights and interests of technology holders are also respected. So that balance to be struck in this respect will be left to the actors concerned through the negotiation of mutually agreed terms and conditions. Now, I know my time's up. I'm just going to briefly mention the clearinghouse mechanism, which has also been established under the BBNJ agreement. That will also be an important tool for implementing these capacity building and technology transfer provisions. While the specific modalities for the operation of the clearinghouse mechanism will be determined by the COP at a later date, we already know that it's been tasked to perform a number of wide-ranging functions. So the clearinghouse will serve as a centralized platform to enable parties to access, provide, and disseminate information with respect to data, marine scientific and technological knowledge and research relating to the other elements of the BBNJ package deal. In addition, the clearinghouse will also assist in facilitating scientific and technical cooperation within and between parties, the private sector, research institutions, and other relevant stakeholders, and also provide links to other global, regional, and sectorial clearinghouse mechanisms, as well as gene banks, repositories, and databases for the exchange of information. And so this could really strengthen cooperative links between existing governance organisations and bodies, but also help to foster collaborative initiatives and research projects amongst states. I think it will also be an invaluable practical tool to enhance the data sharing infrastructure and ensure equitable access to data, because we know that information concerning deep sea biodiversity is currently located in different institutions and databases around the world. And so in conclusion, I'll just briefly mention the monitoring, review and follow-up mechanism that we now have under Part 5. Article 45 provides for the periodical monitoring and review of capacity building and technology transfer activities and initiatives that are undertaken pursuant to the instrument. Now, as Part 14 of UNCLOS lacks such a mechanism for measuring the success of capacity building efforts, this again fills another important gap. And we know from existing initiatives that a continuous cycle is required from the needs assessment right through to planning, implementation, evaluation, and follow-up. So now under the Capacity Building and Transfer of Marine Technology Committee, we have the ability to periodically monitor and review capacity building and technology transfer undertaken under the instrument. So aside from monitoring and overseeing the implementation of Part 5 of the agreement, the committee will also play an important role in providing recommendations to the Conference of the Parties to consider and take action upon. So in conclusion, by revitalising and strengthening Part 14 of UNCLOS, the capacity building framework that we now have in Part 5 of the BBNJ agreement really paves the way for future collaborative projects, initiatives and partnerships between and amongst states, as well as relevant stakeholders, and should be seen as a useful tool for enhancing regional cooperation to foster sustainable and inclusive ocean governance in the Southeast Asia region. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for enlightening us with a very positive presentation for the filling the gap of Part 5 under BBNJ agreement to Part 14 of UNCLOS. I can find at least 4 main points that Part 5 BBNJ agreement can help UNCLOS in the future. First one is the definition, or at least not official definition, but the common understanding of capacity building and transfer of technologies, marine technologies. And second, the way that the new BBNJ agreement put forward the meaningful duty to cooperate directly to kind of like cooperation in marine genetic resources and transfer of technologies, etc. And the third point is about the mechanism, the cleansing house mechanism. Obviously, like you said, it's a centralized platform to assess, disseminate information, and of course, facilitate cooperation. And final one is the ways that we have now a mechanism for periodical review and monitoring of capacity building and transfer of marine technology. So all that kind of detailed provision provided for under Part 5 and Annex 2 of the BBNJ agreement will be no doubt will help the implementation of UNCLOS in the future. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation part and open the floor for the Q&A section. We will have about 20 minutes or so for the Q&A section. So first of all, I would like to invite the question from the participant on site. The floor is open. So anyone would like to give the question for our speaker, please identify yourself, address the question to the person or the speaker who would like to address the question, and be short. And I also welcome the question from the online participant. If you have the question, please fill in the question in the chat box, in the Q&A section box, and our technician team will provide it on the screen so that we can help you with the questions. The floor is open. Yes, I saw the hand just behind me. He will need the mic, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Mario Gyuri. I'm the head of the political section at the German Embassy in Hanoi. And I first of all wanted to thank the panel for these very interesting and insightful discussions. And also the DAV for creating this platform for exchange on this very important agreement, the BBNJ, and for bringing us all together today. My question is about policy recommendations. The BBNJ as well as UNCLOS is a high priority for my government, and I think it's also a shared priority for many of us in the room. And so I wanted to ask, when it comes to implementation, what can governments do to ensure that BBNJ is also duly implemented? We know that UNCLOS, for example, can face challenges when some states or other actors do not comply with the regulations under UNCLOS. We see that in the South China Sea, for example. And therefore, my question is, what can we do in the high seas to ensure that implementation also goes smoothly and everyone acts according to the rules in BBNJ? Thank you.
Do you want to address the question to any particular speaker or for the whole panel?
I think indeed would be interesting for from all the viewpoint of all the speakers, if possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I can see the question from Yona. Please.
Yuna Lyons from the from ACOPS and the Center for International in Singapore. Thank you for excellent presentation. I have two questions. The first one is to Dr. Song Tran. To what extent do you think that the BBNJ agreement can be an interpretive has an interpretive value of UNCLOS? And so thinking about the EIA provisions in particular, they do set a process that we didn't have in UNCLOS. So do you think that there is prospects to using the BBNJ agreement in the context of areas within national jurisdiction when implementing the law of the sea? And my second question is really a general one for the four panelists. With respect to your different topics, do you think, what is, in your opinion, the role that regional seas can play? And so what can our regional seas in Southeast Asia do in order to advance the implementation of the rules that you have presented? Thank you.
Yuna, we already have 4 questions, so allow me to get back to our panelists. And I understand that the one question addressed particularly to Dr. Seas-Eng and the other addressed to the general panelists. So please let me start with the other order. May I start with Sarah first and then just go back?
Thank you for great questions. In terms of how do we make sure that it's duly implemented, it's a great question. I think that there's a number of monitoring mechanisms that we do have under the BBNJ agreement that I think we didn't have under UNCLOS, and I hope to make better use of those. So we have a number of institutions. It's actually got one of the most elaborate and sophisticated institutional arrangements that I've ever seen under a treaty. And I think we need to make use of those bodies and particularly the powers that they have now been mandated, particularly when it comes to reporting and overseeing the particular each element of the package deal. So I think one of the greatest benefits that I see with the BBNJ agreement is also, and then Rainer, I think, was one of the main proponents of this, is making sure that there's transparency and that there's open reporting in terms of activities. And so I think now that it will fall to states to show that they are implementing their duties, they're abiding by their obligations. They need to file reports with the COP. They need to file reports with each of the bodies in respect to each element of the package deal. And I think that's where if certain states are not abiding by their obligations and duties, that obviously diplomatic pressure and other means can be used to try and influence them to comply. So I think that. And did you want me to answer the second question as well about regional seas while I'm here? Yeah? Great question. Thanks, Yuna. I think for capacity building, I mentioned about building a regional network of capacity building partners. And I think especially for this region, it would be really important. At a regional level, I think we could work together to raise awareness about the benefits of the BBNJ agreement. I think sometimes because it went for so long, the negotiations, we get bogged down in a lot of the controversial elements of the agreement rather than really raising the awareness about the benefits, particularly at a regional level. So I would love to have more regional workshops, webinars, high-level events where we're getting together people around the region to participate. Sorry, I think I saw you. I'm going to stop talking now, otherwise. Okay, I will stop and hand over.
Please, particularly the question for you.
Thank you for your question. I think that the EIA session in part 4 of the agreement, because it is an implementing agreement of UNCLOS. So we know that in UNCLOS, the provisions on EIA is very general. The UNCLOS provision say that when state party have reasonable ground to believe that the planned activity have the potential, may cause a substantial pollution or significant or harmful change to the environment. The party have much conduct in EIA, but it's not mentioned, UNCLOS not mentioned the detailed process or the thresholds is very general. So I think that the agreement has set out a more detailed framework so that the planned activity in ABNJ could be conducted in a full-scale EIA. And I think that there are two kinds of conducting an EIA for activities planned in under national jurisdiction, but taking place in ABNJ, and the second one for activities in ABNJ. I think that and some areas may be affected if the agreement come into effect, such as the deep sea mining, the exploration of all the bioprospecting, because before authorizing an activity, state party must conduct a screening of the activity, the potential impacts. And so if the threshold is met and the state party could determine that EIA full scale is needed or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And turn to you, Associate Professor Hamis Ruli.
Thank you so much for the question posed to us. I think I'm going to answer the question together because Yuna's question is on how do regional organizations work together, and the question was that was given by the gentleman just now is on how do we work things together. So I think maybe I will, since I'm from Malaysia, I will basically share the Malaysian experience. My country is being surrounded by many other countries: Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, and so on. So in our experience being an independent nation for more than 50 years, overlapping maritime claims is something that we are still facing. We cannot get collective agreement in certain areas. So for instance, with Singapore, we still have issues pertaining to the overlapping maritime areas in Pedra Branca. The case was decided in 2008 and it has not been decided which maritime area around Pedra Branca belongs to Singapore, which belongs to Malaysia, and Indonesia is also waiting. I mean, Indonesia also have their stake there. So with regards to BBNJ, I'm pretty sure things like this would happen in terms of when you put it into implementation. So I think the best way to just like what Sarah has mentioned just now, the best way is negotiation. And one more thing, in Malaysia, we also involved in the South China Sea dispute at the moment. So we do not want another world war to happen. So, and the preamble of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea also mentioned that the seas are to be preserved for peaceful purposes. And the peaceful, in order to keep peace, we have to negotiate, we have to talk to each other. And one thing that we can do is to make sure, even though it will take a long time to resolve these problems, but at least there is a progress rather than, nothing is done. I think that's from me. Thank you so much.
And from the scientific voice, do you have any suggestion for us?
Yeah, I think like the Philippines is I think everybody knows the predicament when it comes to defining boundaries, no? As far as the Philippines is concerned. So I wouldn't touch on that. But But I guess the best way is to lay out a common understanding of each of the provisions. And I think like fora such as these would be very helpful. And if it could be conducted quite frequently, then we would be able to come up with a common understanding of those provisions and then effectively define boundaries. In terms of science and technology, I think in one of the discussions during the BBNJ meetings, there was mention of a scientific and technical committee, and that committee could very well help look into what priority research areas can be done and the different roles that each of the countries should play when it comes to coming up with a region-wide what they call engagement in all of those scientific investigations. So yeah, I think there's no problem with the technical capability, but the problem mainly would be the financial support. Thank you very much.
I will get back to the room to collect more questions from the on-site participant. Yes, I see the hand here, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Bing from the Vietnam Institute of Fishery and Economics and Planning under the Ministry of Agriculture. Just for example, in the ASEAN areas, so we consider that we are sharing the very, let's say, common, and we share the common situation, and we share this the living marine resources, for example, fish and other things. So within the agreement, I would like to ask if, for example, Dr. Rusli, right? What do you think about the we established the MPA and in the ABNG, and for example, so we can manage together to manage that one and so on. And thank you.
Another question, please. Yes, please.
My name is San from Cần Thơ University. I would like to ask the question related to the public goods and also concerning to report from the Philippines and also Malaysia, because the first very important in terms of the genetic resource, marine genetic resource, very important report. But it is in public good, but in management between the jurisdiction and non-jurisdiction based on the second report. So my question in terms of management and development related to report for the in the future.
Any other questions? Yes, please. the General Consul from Malaysia, right?
Hello, good morning. I'm the Consul General of Singapore. I want to respond to Professor Hamzi's point about Petrobranca. Petrobranca has been settled. Petrobranca sovereignty has been ruled to belong to Singapore. Middle Rocks belongs to Malaysia. There's no doubt about it. South Ledge to be determined, and we have a joint working committee to settle that. So I think I just want to make that point here.
Can I respond to that? I mean all right.
Okay, good morning. I am Muhammad Lutfur Rahman, Bangladesh ambassador. Just I have a simple question as a layman. That I know that the marine technology is a very, sometimes it's a costly technology and costly undertaking. So, how this technology or its benefit can be shared with the BBNJ members? There will be some special concession or something, different for them.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Mary? Yeah, please.
Good morning and guten Tag. My question is for Dr. Rowena. Under the BBNJ agreement, fishing regulated under relevant international law and fishing-related activities and fish and other living marine resources known to have been taken in fishing and fishing-related activities are exempt from the application of the provisions on marine genetic resources and DSI. I'm wondering what sort of intersections you see, what opportunities or challenges you see given this exemption from the application of marine genetic resources and DSI under the BBNJ agreement regime. Thank you.
Sorry. I think there is a question at the back as well. Can you raise again your hand so I can see you?
I'm a researcher from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, and I have a question related to the MPA in the BBNJ. The first question, in the case of an MPA established on the high sea, but the subsoil of the area is under the jurisdiction of the coastal state. So what responsibility do the coastal state have to ensure that their exploitation activity do not affect the effectiveness of the MPA above? And the next question, what are the key elements of the MPA in the BBNJ agreement that the ISA should consider when negotiating and building the mining code? Thank you.
Well, we have enough question and comments, so let me get back to the panelists. But I'm afraid that for the benefit of time, please shorten your answer so that we can finish in time and not eat up for the time of the next panel. So I start with the two first speaker because they received the most question. Start with you, Irina.
Yeah, I'd like to answer the question about the concern on the fishing as well as an exempted exemption in the provision. I think that was one of the most controversial provisions ever because we all know that some species of fish are highly migratory. So it can be caught from the high seas, moved down to the different coastal states. But I think I don't know if it will be resolved with the fact that it has been part of an exclusion. But like when I was at CIFDEC, we've had studies that were funded by the ASEAN, Japan ASEAN Fund, and we worked on the Anguillid eels. And it was for a common purpose. That is because like the Japanese have their eels already, the population have been declining and they want to figure out where it spawns, etc. But for purposes of research, I think that can be done. And it was done quite effectively. So we were able to collaborate and cooperate with them. I think the tricky part there is because it's mainly for human consumption. So from that aspect, it overlaps somehow with the regulations that has something to do with fishing. So I think from that aspect, that would be a rather sensitive part of it. As for the question on surveys that are that are costly, it is costly. I think one of the provisions include the fact that, like, for technology transfer, people from developing states should be involved in some of those expeditions, and it's not really purely a activity that should be done by the developed states. And in that sense, we get to be capacitated, even if we're not into investing heavily on the equipment or the fishing vessels. But the fact remains that we're able to be part of the expedition. We can do the research ourselves together with the developed states who are more capable of doing such initiatives. So what else? I think that would be all.
Turn to answer all the question and perhaps make a comment to the Consular General of Singapore.
We cannot be pressed together. Okay, thank you for all the questions. Some of the questions are quite technical. Maybe for the technical questions with regards to the question given by the final question posed to me, maybe we can discuss further over lunch, or because it feels like it's quite technical. I need more than just 5 minutes to elaborate, but it's a very good question. All right. Okay. So for the first inquiry on the MPA for fisheries, we have to remember when states wants to establish an MPA in areas beyond national jurisdiction, submission has to be made to the COP. And what kind of MPA? If it involves, shipping activities, then it has to, IMO has to be involved. It involves fisheries, then fisheries organization has to be involved within the discussion of that is part of the COP. Okay, so in order to answer your question, sir, when you mentioned about fisheries, then submission has to be made by the states concerned, and it has to be regional fisheries organization has to be consulted in order to know what kind of fisheries activities to be avoided in that area, what kind of activities that can be done or cannot be done in order to ensure that MPA would be successful. That's number one. And number two, we need scientific evidence in order to justify why such MPA should be implemented. So it will take a lot, with long time for it to be executed. But I think it's not impossible. It's possible, but it requires a bit of a time. And to respond to my friend from Singapore, yes, I agree with him. Pedra Branca case was decided in 2008. I was still doing my master's at that time. What I meant is just the maritime boundaries around the Pedra Branca and Middle Rocks that has not been resolved until today. Just that. But Malaysia and Singapore are good friends. Every time we have problems, we will just have teh tarik and we'll forget about our problems. Okay. All right. So I hope I have clarified my points with you, sir. Thank you so much.
With Seas-Eng and Sarah, could you please address any question that you would like to add on? And perhaps if you can cover some of the question on the screen as well.
Thank you. I'd like to address the second question. How will EIA be standardized across jurisdiction, and how will data sharing be managed? Yes, for that question, my opinion is that I think that jurisdiction is not really important in this case because the BBNJ agreement emphasize on the potential impacts the activity might cause to the environment in the IBNJ, because we have, if the activities take place in IBNJ, and we have to follow very strictly the BBNJ process for EIA. But for the activities that are under national jurisdiction but have caused potential impacts, to the ABNJ environment, the party may choose to follow the national process for EIA conduction, or it can choose the BBNJ requirement. So if the national process, but the BBNJ agreement also asks that the national process must is equivalent to the BBNJ agreement or below the threshold used in the agreement. And so I think that jurisdiction is not very important here, but we emphasize the impacts which may a planned activity impact the ABNJ environment. And the second one is how data relating to EIAs shall be managed. The agreement set out a lot of mechanism, especially the clearinghouse mechanism, so that the party conducting EIA will have to make reports through the clearinghouse mechanism. And other concerning parties, if they protest or they disagree with that report, or even if a party determine that an EIA process is not necessary, and other party may register their concern. And I think that the agreement set out a lot of effective, in theory, effective mechanism. But unless we see it, if it works in practice, because it needs cooperation with other institute, instrument, and frameworks. Thank you.
And Sarah, please.
I'll keep my comments short for you. There was a question about what type of technologies and benefits will be shared, and I think that links in nicely with that first question of how will benefits from MGRs be shared fairly, especially with developing countries. So under the BBNJ agreement, state parties will now have an obligation to share both monetary and non-monetary benefits fairly and equitably. Now, non-monetary benefits have been dealt with, so that most of that will be facilitated, I anticipate, through the clearinghouse mechanism, which will be that centralized platform for disseminating data, research results, etc. Monetary benefits, a little bit more tricky, weren't able to get it across the line, so that will be decided at a later date. So that's something we're going to have to circle back on. But I think one of the greatest gaps between North and South is when it comes to marine genetic resources. So I think if we can do what Dr. Rowena said, is really try to enhance more marine scientific research cooperation between states and collaborative research projects, because I think that will be key, as well as enabling developing states to access those technologies, particularly biotechnological applications that are very expensive and are very sophisticated. So, and if I can just circle back, I'm going to be a bit cheeky, to that first question about implementation. I should have mentioned that there is a whole part 8 now devoted to implementation and compliance under the BBNJ agreement, and we actually have a committee for that specific purpose. And so I think that gives it a little bit more teeth now in terms of what we had previously under UNCLOS. Thank you for indulging me with that.
Well, thank you so much for all your great answer and participation. With that, I would like to close the first section. And before we close, could you please join me to give the big round of applause to all the speakers and the active participants. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists and participants, for such a lively discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, before ending our coffee break, I would like to invite Dr. Nguyễn Hồng Sơn, Mr. Florian Ferrer-Ban, all panelists, all participants, and other representatives of the co-organizer from Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, the Conrad Adenauer Stiftung, to come to the front and take a group photo. Please. May I invite all of you to come to the front and make 3 lines along 3 steps. Please come to the stage. mời mọi người lên chụp ảnh đi ạ, mà toàn thể tất cả đấy ạ, tất cả mọi người tham dự ạ. Em mời tất cả mọi người lên chụp ảnh ạ. Chụp ảnh tất cả mọi người tham dự luôn ạ. Anh ơi, mời các chị lên chụp ảnh tập thể ạ. Em mời các chị lên ạ. Em mời anh lên ạ. Vâng. Ừ? Em Em xin mời tất cả các quý đại biểu lên để chụp ảnh tập thể ạ. Dạ. Thank you very much. Thôi. Giờ ta có break xong, bây giờ bắt đầu. 15 phút, 15 phút, 10 phút được. Ladies and gentlemen, please take a 10-minute break. We will come back at 10:53. Thank you so much. Online audience, please stay tuned.
Send the presentation out here, but can I send it now?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to start the next section. Please take a seat. Before we start the next session, please kindly switch all the mobile devices into silent mode. And please note that you can scan the QR code in the name tab for program and book list. Distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, may we begin the second session on the topic, New Prospect of Deep Sea Mining Regulation. It's an honor to have Mr. Florian Fairbairn, Resident Representative of Conrad Adenauer Stiftung Vietnam, to moderate this session. Our respected panelists for this session include Dr. Suna Lien, Advisory Committee on Protection of the Sea, Dr. Christine Kroger, Management Advisor, Senior Researcher of Queen University Belfast, Associate Professor Dr. DAV, Director of Institute of Oceanography, Member of LTC ICA, and Ms. Dieter Lilienza, Research Fellow, Center for International Law, National University of Singapore. Mr. Florian, the floor is yours, please.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Okay, I adjust the microphone a little bit closer so I don't have to bend too much over the table. Yeah, I'm very pleased to welcome you back after the coffee break. I hope the caffeine intake is sufficient to keep you awake. If not, I'm not concerned because we have an excellent panel assembled to my left. In case it's quite the opposite of a panel, it's like an all-female panel. For previous events, we together received some criticism, I won't reveal by whom, that there were males actually. And in this case, on today's forum setup with all the panels, I would say there's an overwhelming majority of highly qualified female experts. And it's quasi the reverse, where having the moderator as a man and then the women do the explaining. But I'm very content with that. We have 4 speakers with us to discuss about the issue of the new prospects of deep sea mining regulations, a topic that is, of course, also very much tied to geopolitical concerns, but also to the main challenge of our times, climate change and how to combat climate change. I think this will also feature into the discussion when we talk about deep sea mining risks and opportunities. That, of course, deep sea mining also carries certain risks, that's for sure. And I think that will be made very clear that we therefore need certain regulations, and we will talk about the prospects for those regulations coming into place. But of course that there are also certain opportunities when we talk about deep sea mining, because when we want to decarbonize our economy, we will rely on certain critical raw materials, minerals, and they can be found also on the seabed. And if we want to, for example, build up photovoltaic or wind power, we have to be aware that the same electricity output of one gas-fired power plant would need the double amount of critical minerals when we substitute it by photovoltaic. When we talk about wind power, the factor would be 7 times. So, I mean, it's very, very crucial to tap into new resources of critical minerals. Just efficiency improvements alone and dual economy circulation will not do the trick. The question is just to what degree can be deep seabed mining a substitute for land mining? And I think this critical question will be also discussed today. In the previous panel, in the first panel, we already had a brief introduction also to deep seabed mining, also the regulations and the framework that we find there. We already talked about UNCLOS, the 1994 agreement relating to the implementation of the Part 11 of UNCLOS, and of course the role of the ISA, the International Seabed Authority. In this panel, we will talk more about the challenges and obstacles for new sea mining, a new mining code. What is the linkage between this code or potential code and UNCLOS, and of course the already mentioned BBNJ, and how to balance the different goals of economic growth that are already mentioned and environmental protection and social well-being. And how, of course, also to bridge the different interests of various actors, and I also already initially mentioned the geopolitical angle to it, who will get to explore and then to exploit what and how. Allow me a few words about Germany's position and the focus that we in Germany have put also on deep seabed mining. Germany has taken a quite precautionary approach and is actually asking for a moratorium. And basically the bottom line here is we do not know enough. And there are always some figures how much we know and how much we do not know. I mean, I'm not sure about the digits behind the first zero, but there are some figures that say that we only know 0.01% of the deep seabed. Others say it's 0.0001%. I'm sure the experts to my left, they will know the figures much better. But bottom line here is we know very little, and therefore we also can predict only with a limited degree how much any human interaction with this ecosystem would affect the system in itself. So the first speaker today is Dr. Una Lyons. She is the chair of the board and trustees of the Advisory Committee on the Protection of the Sea, or abbreviated ACOPS, in the United Kingdom. She's also a senior global fellow with the Center for International Law, NUS, in Singapore. Dr. Una Lyons completed a PhD research thesis with the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security of the University of Wollongong, Australia. We already had Sarah speaking from that institution to us today. And her topic was sensitive marine areas in the South China Sea, so not too far away from us here in the Mekong Delta. Prior to this, Dr. Una Lyons was a counselor in the litigation arbitration group of Clifford Chance, based in the Paris office. She also obtained a master in marine affairs at the College of Ocean and Fisheries of the University of Washington. Her research areas include the protection of sensitive marine areas in Southeast Asia, taking into account the underlying legal and institutional governance framework and the interplay of international law and science in use of satellite imagery. And she already showed me some interesting maps here, not a satellite imagery to be sure, to inform marine environmental management, offshore oil and gas in Southeast Asia, as well as the sustainable use of marine resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction, which is the topic of today. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Florian, for this kind introduction, and good morning to everyone. I would like to first thank the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for kindly inviting me. It's always a great pleasure to come back to Vietnam. I had never come to Canton, but worked with colleagues here, and I was delighted to see them again, finally in the flesh, and actually get to come to southern Vietnam. So I will give you a global introduction to this issue, leading on to the region, perhaps. And so let's go into content. So what are we talking about when we're talking about seabed mining and mining for minerals? We are talking about manganese, cobalt, nickel, copper, and when we're talking about seabed mining, what is the mineral forms that they found as? They're found in three main categories of deposits, so which are the polymetallic nodules, the polymetallic sulfides, and the cobalt-rich crust. Found at different depths in different parts of the world. So looking now at these different parts of the world, so it's a conversation which is very much a global conversation, which is looking at minerals beyond national jurisdictions. And so if you look at this map, you see the location of clusters of areas where there has been exploration going on for decades. And on the left-hand side of the map, you have the largest of them all with 17 exploration contracts in the Clarion-Clipperton zone. And these are all polymetallic nodules resources. Now, how is the conversation unfolding? So that was the perspective from the early 80s. And you see nickel, cobalt, manganese, and you you see two round cylinders, one which is the global amount and another huge one, which is simply what is found in the Clarion-Clipperton zone. So you can understand how this was the narrative until not so long ago. And obviously, as there is so much more simply in the Clarion-Clipperton zone in the Pacific Ocean, there is, when there is a demand for an increased demand for minerals, a tightening of land-based supplies and advances in mining technology, it's a bit of a no-brainer. The conversation goes to seabed mining resources. So this was the way the conversation went, but it is changing. And here I would like to introduce this idea of the Overton window. The Overton window, well, Overton is a policist, and he developed that concept a little while ago. It's a political theory concept that refers to the range or the window of policies that the public could accept. And the ideas that are in this window are perceived are not extreme and therefore could be acceptable to the public. So the more you enlarge this Overton window, the more ideas become acceptable and can be developed into policies. So this kind of theory is at the moment talked a fair bit about in political circles, such as when you have extreme governments being elected in positions that change the conversation in a country. Another example was given in political theory, for instance, was the vote of women, which was certainly not acceptable. It came into the conversation and then it became palatable. Well, I would argue that this theory of the Overton window is quite applicable to the development of the conversation on seabed mining. So the image I showed just before was showing how it was a no-brainer to go to the seabed because there is so much more resources there. But as the pressure came, suddenly there's a strong wind of resistance that has occurred. And I mean, I will do a very brief overview. So I'm not going to share with you, there's hundreds and hundreds of publications, and it's become an extremely active field. And so there's a very strong voice against, which is saying that seabed mining exploitation is absolutely unacceptable, given its irreversible environmental impact on biodiversity. It says that seabed mining exploitation is unacceptable also because it is unnecessary to go to the seabed because we could do much better with new technologies and we can recycle. And there is also insufficient scientific knowledge on the deep sea ecosystems, and therefore we shouldn't go and disturb the last frontiers of the marine environment. But then in favor, there is also a strong wind, which is saying that yes, seabed mining is necessary for the energy transition, and that a number of the critical minerals that are necessary are found beyond national jurisdiction. That in fact, seabed mining has less adverse environmental effect than terrestrial mining. That the geopolitics would justify doing so because these critical minerals are found only and under the control of a limited number of powers who can therefore abuse of their position vis-a-vis others. There is also greater social acceptance of what happens far away from the land, and given the human rights linked issues in the context of land-based mining, that's yet again an argument in favor of seabed mining. And so all of this, in parallel with these two conversations happening, with perhaps not enough exchange between them, there has been a 2-year rule that was triggered by Nauru at the International Seabed Authority in 2021, requiring that exploitation regulations be developed by the International Seabed Authority, and saying this rule in substance says that if within those 2 years, exploitation regulations have not been adopted, an application for work can nevertheless be put forward by a contractor. And so we're now in a situation where the International Cyber Authority is planning for mining code by 2025. Now, the plot is thickening. Very recently, there has been yet another drama in this two parallel conversation, which would be the discovery of dark oxygen production. It's a hypothesis. It is, for now, simply a scientific communication. And what this discovery would really mean is discussed within scientific communities quite intensely. However, it certainly potentially changes again the conversation in suggesting that oxygen could be produced from the seabed rather than always coming from the atmosphere and photosynthesis that had been believed until now. So to go through a very quick stock take of declared positions. So our host just referred to the fact that Germany is one of those countries who's actually taken a fairly strong position in favor of a moratorium. So you really have one in this conversation where you have clearly a in favor and against seabed mining at the moment at the International Cyber Authority. There's a group of countries that has progressively come forward, and there's more than, depending on who actually tallies, 32 or 33 of them who've been making statements with language that range from the need to apply the precautionary principle, which obviously the precautionary approach is applicable in any case by all, even those who would be in favor, but reiterating that idea to a ban, and this is the most extreme position, and that's France's position, through a precautionary approach or a moratorium. I have, for the sake of time, and I'm already running out of time, I will not go into the details of this, but we'll bring it to your attention, and you can look at it more in details at leisure later, as I believe that the slides will be shared. But it's an interesting landscape of countries that are sponsoring states for activities or not sponsoring states. And when you start looking, you wonder, so what is the rationale to go against or to go in favor? And really what there is that there is no clear map which is coming out of it. There is no clear pattern, and we are really in a multipolar world, and it is quite a complex landscape. So without going through all of them, I would like to emphasize now, thinking a little bit more about the region, that we have at the Legal and Technical Commission, which is the working body of the International Cyber Authority, we do have a number of representatives from Asia, including from Southeast Asia. And there's also a few in council. And that's actually an important thing to bear in mind in the context of our conversation, I believe. And I'll just give you a few more facts and then stop, and then we can pick it up later in conversation. I'll be happy to answer any specific, more specific questions. One of the publications that has come out of the ISA highlight an interesting fact, which is that the contract areas that are being considered for exploration at the moment, so not even exploitation, that will be much smaller compared to the exploration area, represent to 0.61% of the seabed beyond national jurisdiction. So it's this putting in perspective the conversation with respect to the space that we are looking at is actually quite a relevant point. So I will pass this. The point of this slide was simply to highlight that there is an awful lot of work going on with the hope, or the purpose rather than the hope, the objective of a code being adopted in 2025. But there's a number of publications, and the links are in my slides. If you want to look at the list of what has not been discussed and is actually the subject of a lot of discussion. So I will pass those. This conversation about seabed mining beyond national jurisdiction has actually developed a new conversation and new developments within national jurisdiction. Because if it is too hard, or if it takes a while to adopt regulation beyond national jurisdiction, then perhaps on the continental shelf or the extended continental shelf, it could be possible. And this is what Norway is considering at the moment. And there's a lot of other countries, and you've seen beige here. You can look at a number of other exclusive economic zone and extended continental shelves on which there are mineral resources beyond Norway. So India, Japan, Cook Islands, Brazil, and etc. And I will pass the BBNJ agreement that we've already talked about to just conclude looking at the South China Sea. Is there seabed beyond national jurisdiction in the South China Sea? So that was the map until the more recent submissions that were made by Vietnam. This is the map now. I always thought that there was no mineral resources of the kind that was discussed at the ISA in the South China Sea. But then I went digging a little bit. We knew about methane hydrate. It's been discussed for a long time. Oil and gas, of course, has been discussed for a long time. But those other minerals that we just talked about, well, actually, there's a very recent papers from Russia, which is showing that there might be. So I will leave you on these thoughts, and thank you, and my apologies for eating up the time for discussion.
Yuna, don't worry. A round of applause first. I think that's due. I think when we calculated the time, we allocated 10 minutes. You took it to 13 minutes. That's fine, because technically I think you have 12 minutes. So I think we're not too much over time. We should have enough time for the Q&A. The problem is just we started our panel a little bit later. So therefore, I would just like to reiterate that, of course, the current German government does not categorically reject deep sea mining. However, it aims, and its objective is rather to intensify maritime and marine research. And actually, Germany has also concluded 2 exploration. You showed it on one slide. There's no exploitation, but exploration. And there are 2 also exploration contracts with the International Seabed Authority through the Federal Institute for Geoscience and Natural Resources to explore the deep sea in the Pacific and Indian Ocean. So it's not that Germany is just like an innocent bystander, but I think the point that I made before, we need to know more first. That is the policy. Next, we have a German speaker, but not representing a German institution. We have Dr. Kerstin Kröger with us. She's a marine management advisor at the Joint Nature Conservation Committee, JNCC, in Aberdeen, in Scotland, in the United Kingdom. She's also a senior researcher at the Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. Dr. Kröger obtained her Master in Science from the CAU University in Kiel in Germany, and her PhD from the University in Wellington, New Zealand in 2004, 20 years ago. Wow. She is a deep sea ecologist with a special interest in benthic biodiversity and communities, the effects of natural and anthropogenic disturbances and pressures on such communities, and their recovery trajectories. Furthermore, she is interested in the management of marine environment, in particular of offshore MPAs in national waters and the high seas. And in addition, Kerstin is also involved in developing management measures for deep sea mining. So she's perfectly qualified to give us a deep dive into deep sea mining and basically the facts on the ground. What are we talking about? The mineral resources, the environmental impact, and the scientific gaps. Kerstin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for contacting me and asking me whether I would like to come along and share my experience. And yes, I love to. So I've never been to Vietnam before, so this is a fantastic opportunity for me. Unlike the other talks, I'm probably mine one is the odd one out, because I'm a marine ecologist. I'm a deep sea ecologist. So my talk is much more down to earth, or shall I say down to deep sea sediment. Because being a deep sea ecologist, being sucked into the fascinating world of international law and UNCLOS and deep sea mining, I have to work out how, for instance, the mining code and BBNJ, how they will work on the floor, on the ship when I take the samples or when I assess the impacts. So thank you very much, Yuna, for the fantastic introduction. I don't need to tell you very much about well, the first few slides I show because you covered them already. That was very kind of you. So, oh, sorry, where is the wee thingy for me to? Right. So deep sea marine mineral resources, we just heard, they don't only occur in the deep sea. And with deep sea, I mean waters deeper than 200 meters. And just to give you a perspective, somebody already mentioned that 71% of the Earth is covered by the oceans. Of these 70%, 90% are actually the deep sea. So we're talking about a huge body of water. In fact, the deep sea is the biggest biosphere on the planet. I think it takes up about 95% of the biosphere, you know, the livable space we have on this planet. So it is a very, very important area. And whatever we do in the deep sea has impacts on climate, on our well-being. With regards to deep sea marine minerals, they do not only occur in international waters, but also in national waters, as you just heard. And I think the most well-known resources are, for instance, the Cook Islands, or many of the Pacific Island states, Norway, as we just heard. But believe it or not, in the Baltic Sea, yes, our little regional area, the little regional sea I'm hailing from, has polymetallic nodules that a Swedish company is now looking to explorate. But the main resources are on the deep seabed on the high sea, so in the area. And at the moment, the ISA, as the competent authority for deep sea mineral resources, has given out 30 licenses for exploration, just for exploration. 19 of these are in the for the nodules, 7 for sulfides, and cobalt-rich crusts are 4. Brazil has let his license expire. And just exploitation, i.e. the industrial harvesting, so to speak, of these minerals is not happening, neither in national waters nor in international waters at this stage. There is no exploitation going on, at least as far as we know. So where do we go on? Right, there we go. Polymetallic nodules are probably the most well-known deep sea mineral resources. They are potato-shaped, as you can see. They occur on all abyssal plains in all 3 oceans, but mainly in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, the Pacific. They have incredibly slow formation rates or growing rates. It takes them millions of years. I mean, you can see 250 millimeter per million of years, really, you know, 2.5 centimeters. That is about that much. So it takes millions of years for them to grow. They are made from all the metals that you can find in seawater. Seawater contains all the chemical elements you remember or might not remember from your periodic tables in school. So over millions of years, under certain oceanographic conditions, these metals, like a pearl in an oyster, they congregate, they aggregate around a core, as you can see in the picture on the bottom right. And they, these cores could be, interesting fact, completely irrelevant, fossil shark teeth, for instance, or little peppers. Their ecological importance lies in that they provide hard substrate. You have a lot of animals, well, not a lot in the deep sea. There you don't find many animals, but you find animals growing on these hard substrates that could not survive in the muddy sediment of the deep sea abyssal plains. So what these nodules create is actually they create small-scale habitat heterogeneity, and thereby an increased biodiversity. Cobalt-rich ferromanganese crusts occur mainly on seamounts, knolls, ridges. They need hard substrates, to precipitate on. And like the nodules, take millions of years for them to grow, and for crusts up to 25 centimeters thick, it takes eons of years to grow them. unlike the nodules, which can be picked up or sucked up from the sediment, they would have to be cut up to be extracted and brought back up to the surface. Polymetallic sulfides or seafloor massive sulfides are connected to tectonic activities, to hydrothermal vents. So the famous black smokers, white smokers you might have heard about. And unlike the other two mineral resources I just introduced to you, they can grow rather quickly because you have superheated water streaming out of the inner of the earth that is rich in metals. And when that water comes in contact with the surrounding cold deep sea water, these minerals fall out and form, sometimes in the span of a few decades, amazing chimneys, 60, 80, 100 meters high. And these chimneys then are actually the world, so to speak, of a very specialized fauna. So when we talk about exploring or exploiting these minerals, for the chimneys, for the polymetallic sulfides, we talk about those vents that have expired, which is sometimes difficult to actually determine whether a vent has been expired or not. The mining process is pretty similar for all of these processes. The resource has to be removed at the seafloor, transported to the surface, and we're talking about 3 to 6 kilometers. So it's no mean feat to bring those resources back up to the surface. It's an engineering conquest, we could probably say. And then on board ship, these minerals need to be separated from the sediment they bring up, that's brought up with the mineral resources, and also the water. And the wastewater needs to be pumped back down again as deep as possible, the wastewater from it. And then the resources need to be transported to a transport ship for final processing on land. And the environmental impacts of deep sea mining, don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of this. They reach from the seafloor, where we probably have the biggest impacts, up to the surface. And we run out of time, but if you have more questions about that, just ask me, grab me, and I can tell you about it until your ears fall off. The main effects of these impacts really are a reduction in the abundance of the local fauna there, and not only of the abundance, but also the biomass and the diversity. And that's where it links to BBNJ, of course. We also have the risk of possible extinction, and extinction before we even knew these species existed and before we have described them and know about their role in the ecosystem. So the community structure is likely to be altered. And although any system can recover, when it comes to the deep sea, because life in the deep sea is extremely slow, it is food limited, growth rates are slow, reproduction rates are slow. So we're talking of probably recovery in terms of hundreds to 1,000 years. And that's why sometimes you read that the systems are not able to recover. They are able to recover in one form or another. Whether they'll be the same is one question. And of course, none of us will see what they look like once they've recovered. So these effects can lead to wider ecosystem changes. And with the climate crisis already, there you can see how the deep sea, through its connectivity to the whole ocean, to the surface of the ocean, and thereby the connectivity to the weather systems of the world, how these wider ecosystem changes that could be created by deep sea mining, why people are worried about them. On the other hand, you might ask, what's new then? As such, impacts, of course, any human exploitative activity has impacts. I mean, aquaculture, agriculture, everything has impact. So what's new, what's different than about deep sea mining? Why are people getting so nervous about it? So the effects are likely to be, as I just said, on a very, very long scale, long term, more than thousands of years for recovery, and also probably on a large scale. we're talking about thousands of square kilometers per year, potentially. And because we do not know very much about the deep sea, the effects are really difficult to quantify and to predict. There are many scientific gaps. These are the known unknowns, so to speak. But the first one, the environmental baselines, that's really, really what we are lacking. And environmental baseline, our knowledge of that is so important because we do not know at this stage what is the normal of the deep sea. We do not know what is the normal variabilities between which levels can parameters swing and everything is still okay. Once we know the normal variability of a system, we then know if one of the monitored parameters catapults out of this range, that serious harm has occurred. By the way, serious harm, although often mentioned, has not been defined at this stage. We need to know from when on serious harm occurs, and we need to know that in order to develop the threshold that I think the next speaker will talk about. We do know that deep sea mining will cause adverse impacts, but we have insufficient evidence to say deep sea mining will cause a significant adverse impact. And with significant, I mean statistically significant. So that still has to be proven. Right, there we go. Right, definition there. Oh, come on. Right, in conclusion, our understanding of the ecosystems affected is still insufficient at this stage to, in my opinion, to start with exploitation of the minerals. For the exploitation to start, we need the appropriate regulation in place, as in the mining code, which might be or might not be signed off in June 2025. Nauru, by the way, or rather Nori, has actually just announced that it will submit its environmental impact statement to the ISA in June 2025. Exploitation, if they start, in my opinion, must be started on a very small scale and in a stepwise fashion, in combination with very effective monitoring, and that is called adaptive management, because otherwise we never will know what the impacts are. We need to start small. Yes, do harm the environment a little bit, monitor it, assess it, then decide, shall we go on or not? And by this stepwise approach, we will learn, we will gather more and more knowledge. And management needs to apply the precautionary principle, but that's already in the existing mining code. And by the way, the so-called the called for moratorium for deep sea mining applies to the exploitation, not to the exploration. There are no plans to stop exploring, and we need to continue exploring in order to gather that knowledge. And that's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerstin. Also, again, for the time management, it was a little bit more than 30 minutes, but less than 14 minutes. So I think we're still good when it comes to time. And I think you and Yuna, you set the stage perfectly well. I mean, Yuna giving us the overview of the two very separate discourses in favor and against deep sea mining, highlighting also the kind of like temporal pressure with the case of Nauru and 2025 approaching just like ahead of us a couple of months from now. And of course, also describing the declared positions of states and also like mentioning how Germany positioned itself. And lastly, showing us also that the South China Sea, not far from here, might be also relevant in this case. Kerstin, repetition is key, and you also like showed us again the distribution of the critical minerals, and also I think that's very important that we actually know what we talk about. Very few of us are ecologists or biologists in this room, and by introducing us to the manganese nodules, the cobalt crusts, and the sulfides, I think we have now a better understanding what we actually talk about and how also mining of those three different critical minerals would have very different environmental impacts and also effects, even though we do not know enough. I think your last point where you said small steps, not great leap forward, but small steps, and never stop exploring. before we start potentially in the future, maybe exploiting, but that exploration and more marine research is necessary. I think that was a very good call. And the stage is set now for Professor DAV Viet Ham, who will talk about the development of environmental thresholds in deep sea mining areas. And let me briefly introduce you the next speaker. Professor Ha is director of the Institute of Oceanography in Vietnam. That is an institute under the Vietnam Academy of Science and Technology. She has directed and coordinated training on marine science and technology for the Central and Central Highland provinces, is a visiting professor at the University of Tokyo, Japan, and a visiting lecturer at the Vietnam People's Navy Command. She also serves as a member of the Legal and Technical Committee of the International Seabed Authority from the period from last year, 2023, up to until 2027. Associate Professor Dr. DAV Viet Ha has spent more than 30 years pursuing marine toxicology research and food safety in Vietnam and the Western Pacific region. She has chaired 6 scientific research projects at the state level and at the level of the Vietnam Academy of Social Sciences and Technology. And I think with this, you're perfectly suited to take over the floor. As I understood, you will not have a presentation, so we can just focus on her words and her presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank for the very wonderful introduction from gentleman moderator. First of all, I would like to say thank to the co-organizer giving me a chance to share our information. I come here from the Institute of Oceanography of Vietnamese Academy of Science and Technology, but now I'm talking under the regulation of the LTC, Legal and Technical Commission, belonging to International Seabed. So my apologies is I could not show any information in the slide, so just talk. And the second answer, I would like to change the topic because I have not updated from the organizing committee. My talk is the development of the regional environment management plan. We call REMT in deep sea mining area developed by LTC ISA. And we work in LTC ISA for 2 years, last year and this year, to develop that REMT. According to the information, the Pacific region have developed a regional framework regarding a living thing and the spectral significance, and they constitute part and the life cycle, behavior and function, and the effect on the interaction with other living things, including the human, and with the physical environment, like the physical environment, the obtaining and utilizing of living or non-living resources for the purpose of maintaining, facilitating, or improve human life. The source of information that can be considered include nature and extension of customary fishery, high migration of marine species or culture significant, open ocean traditional navigation route, traditional approach to management of the marine environment, societal and societal impact of human community, like acknowledging concept of the human well-being and sustainable livelihood. Such conditions may impose on mineral resources related activity. For example, the current CCG environment management plan conditions that are particularly environment interests should not affect direct by physical activity or indirect by mining impact. However, there are no restriction on the other activity, as the protection network was designed for solely mining purpose and objective within ISA mandate. Under that situation, regional environment management plan have developed by LTC in 2023-2024 aim to contribute to fulfilling the mandate of ISA to ensure the effectively protection of the marine environment from harmful effects that may arise from activity in the mining area. In accordance with the Article 145 and 149 of UNCLOS, the purpose of REMS is to provide the region-specific information, measurement, and procedure to ensure effectively protection of marine environment in accordance with Article 145 of UNCLOS. To this is the end. It set overarch Goal and objective is guided by principle established environment management measurement, including the area-based management tool, with cumulative and synergistic effect take into the account and serve to management potential conflict between different human activity occurring in the same region. Regional environment management plan provide a guide for regional environmental management, including setting strategic regional specific goal, objective for the environment management at the individual contracted area, identify knowledge gaps as a key area for future research effort and monitoring effort. Identify the list of potential area-based management measures that are representative of the full range of habitat, biodiversity, sensitive ecology system, and biological community within management area, and or important for the maintenance of ecology system structure and function. Identify and list and potential non-spatial management measure. Support informed decision making for approach level of the environment protection on the regional scale from mining activity, providing guidance for relinquishment of the part of exploitation contract area in the way that may be the best advantage for regional environment objective. Encourage collaboration among contractor and between contractor and other stakeholders, and provides the process for the review of the effectiveness of the environment measure in the meeting of objective of them, including application of the best environmental practical and best available technique. From the guidance, management of the region would be concerned in the environment impact and risk in the region, identify for the indicator for the monitoring, cumulative assessment, area-based management, and protected area. Such regional environment management plans are designed to provide the relevant to the authority as well as a contractor and the sponsor state with the environment management measure and tool, including area-based management tool to support informed decision making, to ensure environment protection on a regional scale from mining activity, and also provide for authority with a clear and consistent mechanism system to identify particular areas should be considered as a representative of the full range habitat, biodiversity, sensitive of the ecology system, biological community, and underwater culture heritage within the management area, and important of the maintaining of ecology system structure and function, and provide those at a appropriate level for protection, including through recognition of no mining zone or environmental or ecological effect from the mining activity. The LTC working now, we are working to develop the mining environment test zone. But actually that is the data is did the work very hard for the moment. So we are now working with the framework using international of the expert group. But we are facing now with the difficulty is that we have almost no data on scientific data on ecology, biology, and other environment data on the deep sea mining area. So now just going on and working very hard. That's mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ha. I could already see from the reaction of some of your co-panelists that there will be a lot of things to be discussed in the Q&A session regarding the last part of your presentation. But first, a round of applause for your timekeeping as well and interesting content. And I think with that, we can directly move on to Dita Liliasana. I should say Dr. Dita Liliasana, who is a research associate at the Ocean Law and Policy Program at the Center for International Law, CIL at NUS, that means the National University of Singapore. She obtained her first law degree from the University of Indonesia in 2014 and her LLM in Sustainable International Development Law from the University of Washington again in 2017 as a Fulbright scholar. She has received recognition for her research work, including being awarded the second prize winner of the 2021 Asian Society of International Law Junior Scholar Award. Pretty long title for an award. She is also an alumna of the 2016 Chosu Academy of the Law of the Sea and the 2018 Summer Academy on the Continental Shelf. The main focus of Lilianza's research is the public international law and the law of the sea. And apart from her research, she's also active in teaching university students and training government officials in ASEAN and IMO meetings. So I think about the training element, it's good to train us here today with your knowledge. The floor is yours. And again, for you, also 10 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm not a doctor yet, but I hope that's a good prayer. So thank you. But I mean, as a young scholar, I think it's always a bit nervous, but also very honored to share the panel with my esteemed panelists. And to me today, it's very special as well, because it's been more than 10 years since I last stepped foot in Vietnam. So I thank DAV and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for the kind invitation. It's always a pleasure to be in Vietnam. And I'm very glad that Yona has already brought some of the issues I was going to raise in my presentation, which is a good thing. Repetition is good. But then maybe you're wondering, what are we doing with ASEAN in a panel about deep sea mining regulations, right? So we just, I'm sorry. So, which is why, because I only have 10 minutes max, and I would like to just focus on two issues, which is really the first one is how are deep sea mining regulations relevant to this region? And what role, if any, does ASEAN play in deep sea mining in the region? Hence, of course, the logical question would then be, are there any ABNG in the seas of Southeast Asia? And I was very happy when Yona mentioned it, because that's exactly what I was going to start my presentation with. But I think before we go on to that, I think just want to show you the map of large marine ecosystems of Asia, just to show you, whenever I mention the seas of Southeast Asia, well, what am I talking about? So I'm basically referring to this large marine ecosystems in Asia, and in Southeast Asia, there are several seas. So these large marine ecosystems are basically boundaries based on ecological criteria. And in Southeast Asia, we have the Gulf of Thailand, South China Sea, Sulu, Celebes, or Sulu Sulawesi Sea, and also Indonesian Sea. But Indonesian Sea is primarily composed of Indonesia's archipelagic waters. So I'm just going to focus on Gulf of Thailand, South China Sea, and Sulu and Celebes Sea. And hence, you may wonder again, based on the map, and I'm sure we're all aware about the geography of Southeast Asia, right? So are there any ABNG in the seas of Southeast Asia? I think with regard to this question, I think what lawyers would usually say is it depends who you're asking. So I put forward 2016 South China Sea Arbitration Award and China's views, because those two are clearly, having different views. So if you refer to the South China Sea Arbitration Award, the answer would be yes, there are deep sea pockets in the South China Sea. But then if you ask China, they would say there is no high seas pocket or deep sea pockets in the South China Sea. But even though the South China Sea Arbitration Award pertained to the Spratly Islands, I think it just confirms that there are deep sea pockets deep sea beyond 200 miles in the South China Sea. And with regard to that, what's also relevant in our discussion is, the extended continental shelf or the continental shelf beyond 200 miles from the baselines. And in this regard, there have been several submissions on extended continental shelf in the South China Sea. There was the joint submission by Malaysia and Vietnam in 2009, submission by Vietnam 2009, and then by Malaysia in 2019. China, Philippines, and Brunei, the other claimant states, basically have not made any submission, but they have indicated the intention to do so. But again, because of the territorial disputes in the South China Sea, even though the rights over continental shelf are inherent, but then there is procedural, obligation under the law of the Sea Convention, where you have to make a submission to the Commission on the Limit of the Continental Shelf, which will establish the entitlements of your ECS. And because if we look at the South China Sea arbitration, then it should be based on, the Southeast Asian mainland or the archipelagic baselines of, archipelagic countries, for instance, Indonesia or Philippines, or from juridical islands, because the award clearly said that, none of the high seas features in the Spratly can generate a continental shelf. But as you may be aware that when there is a dispute, then these submissions have been deferred by the Commission. In a sense, the disputes have limited CLCS ability to assess extended continental shelf claims and leading to divert submissions. But then I was also very happy that Yona talked about, the Russian paper. I wasn't even aware of that. But I think many of us know that, several years ago, I think 7 years ago, China basically published that they found polymetallic nodules in the South China Sea. And as we know that when we're talking about deep sea mining regulations, we're talking about, the 3 types of mineral resources that our previous panelists have discussed. And at least from what China claimed, there are polymetallic nodules in this South China Sea. And I haven't read the Russian paper that Yona mentioned, but there seems to be minerals that are, if we do have deep sea pockets in the South China Sea, then that would fall under the mining code. Then really, because I only have 4 minutes left, what role, if any, does ASEAN play in deep sea mining in the region? So just to put a context, so there are a lot of regional cooperation frameworks in Southeast Asia. ASEAN is one of them, but it's not the only one. I mean, there are cooperation between ASEAN states and external partners, but none of these comprehensively regulate seabed mining within or beyond national jurisdiction. Some mention seabed mining, but not substantially or meaningfully. There are other regional bodies like APAC and PEMC. They do have expressed statements about deep sea mining, but then, for instance, for APAC, they just mentioned that seabed mining is an example of an emerging activity that are relevant to APAC. COPSI, no mention of seabed mining, at least last time I checked. And then for PEMC, there were several statements basically saying that we need to assess and manage environmental risks of seabed mining. And it is an industry that could add pressure to coastal and marine environments. But in a sense, ASEAN has not extensively addressed seabed mining, but potentially there are 2 pillars within ASEAN that may have mandates to address it. But just so we all know that ASEAN's current environmental focus on mining is limited to terrestrial mining, like sand mining, tin mining, but very little attention to seabed mining. And there are, like I said, there are 2 pillars that may be relevant in this context under the economic pillar and then social cultural pillar. And I'm sorry, it's quite small, but under the economic pillar, we have the ASEAN ministerial meeting on minerals, and under that there are senior officials meeting on minerals, and then several working groups that could be relevant to our discussion. Within the social cultural community, we have the ASEAN Working Group on Coastal and Marine Environment, which has the general mandate to protect marine environment in Southeast Asia. They haven't, seabed mining has not come under the radar yet, but it could potentially be one of the things that they should look into. And there are several relevant ASEAN instruments that mention, mineral mining, but really it's subtle, like mining in coastal areas, but then nothing that explicitly said seabed mining or seabed mining within or beyond national jurisdiction. But also happy that Yona mentioned some of the things I was going to say in this slide. So in terms of participation of ASEAN states in the ISA, and the deep sea mining. Just to show that some of the ASEAN member states are quite active. The first president of the ISA Assembly, which is the supreme organ of the International Seabed Authority, is an Indonesian, Professor or Ambassador Hashim Jalal. And Indonesia has had a seat in Group C of the ISA Council as a major net land-based exporter of minerals. Indonesia and Singapore have had seats in Group E of the ISA Council, but that group is based on equitable geographic distribution. And some current members of the ISA Legal and Technical Commission were nominated by ASEAN member states. And I'm very glad I'm sitting next to one of them, Professor Ha. And also the ISA has issued exploration licenses for mineral resources in areas like the one in the Pacific, where Ocean Minerals Singapore, which is a Singapore-based or Singapore-registered company, also sponsored by Singapore, is the only Southeast Asian company exploring polymetallic nodules. So just to wrap up my presentation, I think the diverse interests among Southeast Asian states make consensus on seabed mining policies challenging because we know that in ASEAN it's consensus based. Some are quite advanced in terms of deep seabed mining. Like we know Singapore has one company investing in the exploration, but then others are still quite behind. When it comes to consensus, it's always a challenge in ASEAN. And also, like we've seen, Southeast Asia's regional frameworks favor flexible, non-binding guidelines. So even if we do have, future guidelines on seabed mining, at least for those areas within national jurisdiction of Southeast Asian states, I think, the implementation will vary across different states because usually the nature is non-binding and implementation would be different from one country to another, and usually there's capacity building involved in order to promote implementation. And as I said briefly, sovereignty disputes in Southeast Asia complicate regional policy on seabed mining, potentially heightening tensions due to China's strong presence in the field. But potentially ASEAN could lead on seabed mining policy. I mentioned other regional bodies like COPC, PEMC, and APEC. But I think given ASEAN centrality and the fact that the ASEAN has a lot of bodies and mechanisms that we can tap into, I think ASEAN could be the one, where the focus or, where development or regional policy on seabed mining could take place. And also finally, regional frameworks, I think should prepare for future seabed mining within national jurisdiction, but also consider impacts from mining in the areas beyond national jurisdiction on Southeast Asian waters. Thank you very much and looking forward to questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Dieter, I'm pretty sure that you should not have any concern that you will also receive a doctorate in the near future after this comprehensive presentation. I think there's no doubt about that. And thank you for highlighting also the 2016 Arbitration Award and therefore also answering the question if there are any areas beyond national jurisdiction in the South China Sea. Again, repetition is key. We avoided redundancies, created synergies between the presentations. Your presentation again highlighted also the point that there are in fact critical minerals to be found here in the South China Sea. And even though those are not your words and not the words that you put on the slide, I would say the conclusion would be that there is no ASEAN centrality when it comes to seabed mining in the South China Sea. Even though there may be some relevant bodies that could play a larger role in the future, but currently as a descriptive analytical assessment, there is no centrality of ASEAN. I think before we gather questions from the audience, and I give you a few minutes to think about your questions to our four excellent panelists, I think I would give the floor back to our panelists here because I could see there is some discussion already evolving. So I give the floor first to Kerstin and then to Yuna to respond to the last two presentations.
Oh dear. I got caught on the spot here, I feel. It was more helping out a colleague, to be perfectly honest. But I think you mentioned that you still have very little data in order for the thresholds to be produced. I actually think we do already have quite a lot of data from, for instance, the the Clarion-Clipperton zone, I may say, because that's the area where most explorative work has been done so far. And just to be clear about these thresholds, they will have to be different, for each of the different mineral types, because we're talking different ecosystems, and they will have to be different also for the location. So it is quite likely that the threshold development, as it's done through the legal or under the organization of the Legal and Technical Committee, will just provide a framework, but the actual values, so deciding which parameters are used for threshold, but I think the actual values, that's not the work of the Commission there. That will have to be done by the actual contractors, and then for their particular license area where they're going to mine, and that then has to be signed off through the ISA.
Okay, while you still think about your questions, and please indicate with your hand if you would like to raise a question to the audience. I see one on the right-hand side. I pass the microphone to Dr. Yuna Lyons, and I collect also questions from the online participants. We have one question in the room. Please raise your hand if there are any more questions or comments.
Thank you, and thank you for really complimentary presentations made after mine. It's like we were on a roller, like we picked up, the next one picked up where the previous one started, which is really good. One, and I very much agree with the comment that Kirsten added, and I would say another nuance to add in terms of characterizing the impact and the data needed that has not been talked about. We are working in terms of environmental impact on the assumption of particular machinery being used and particular technology, when in fact very few have been seen at work for now, and they are potentially less impactful ones that exist and are being developed that would have lesser impact. And so, but this part of the conversation is something that has not yet really started, which is nuancing adverse effect depending on the type of technology and whether waste is actually sent back into the environment or not. Why would it be? And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question is from Dr. Tao from the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. Please also indicate if your question is addressed to a specific panelist. Yeah.
Thank you, panelists, to give us a comprehensive picture of the deep sea mining activity. I think that deep sea mining activity and BBNJ activity are based on the common ground of the common legal ground, the principle of the common heritage of humankind. Yes. So how do we think about the possibility that we would have as a common management mechanism for the both regime? Yes. And it will reflect it in the mining code, yes, adopted in 2025, yes, before the entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. Yeah. So that, for example, that said now we can propose that the extension of the competence of the ISA, yeah, to cover the BBNJ activities. So that, thank you.
And is your question addressed to any specific panelist, or is it just for the whole panel? Whoever.
I think that
whoever wants to pick. Okay, I have two. I don't see any other questions in the. Okay, one more question in the room.
Hello, thank you. Hazmi from Malaysia. I have a question for Dita. By the way, good presentations from all the panelists. But I have one question for Dita. Your slides are very interesting. It's an eye-opener. I was really attracted to the fact that your question, you raised a question on whether or not South China Sea has ABNJ or does not have an ABNJ. So my question is, which situation will make things more complicated? If South China Sea has ABNJ or if it does not have any ABNJ? politically, legally, or in any point of view that you can discuss? Which situation will make what we have now more complicated? Thank you.
Okay, maybe we pick up on those two questions from the audience first. So I return the last question. We start with the last question, and then we move on to the first. And if we have enough time, we take also the two questions from online participants. Dieter?
That's a difficult question. I was still thinking and trying to get my imagination going, especially before lunch. So it's quite hard. But I appreciate the question, Dr. Hasmi. Is clearly an interesting one. I think each would have its own challenges. I'm not sure which one would be more complicated because I'm not a psychic, but I think each would have its own challenges. I mean, it also depends on I mean, we know there have been some joint developments, in the relevant areas, but then also maybe some states would be willing to lose some legal claims in exchange for political gains. But then that's clearly beyond, my knowledge and as a lawyer. But I'm sure whatever ways moving forward, it will have its own challenges. I think that's clear.
It was a very diplomatic answer, the last concluding remark. Okay, so we go back to the question of Dr. Tao, and I'm looking at my panelists if anyone wants to address that very broad and big question of the prospect of a mining code and the ISA role in there, or if that is also beyond your personal expertise. Okay, then we move on. If no one feels comfortable answering this question, then that needs to be accepted by the person asking the question. We don't want to exceed the personal expertise here. So 2 questions on the screen. The first one, I read it out aloud. How effective will the new mining code be in enforcing responsible and sustainable mining practices? Also a rather broad question. I'm looking at my panelists here. Anyone feels comfortable addressing that one? Okay, Kerstin.
I actually feel comfortable to address both. So how effective will the new mining code be? Well, I mean, coming back to the psychic, we don't know yet because that new mining, it's not actually a new mining code. The mining code exists as such. It's just that, the exploration regulations exist. It's just the exploitation regulations that are not signed off yet. But we are expecting the next consolidated text actually this November actually. So I'm checking the ISA web pages daily to see if they've come out. How effective will it be? I actually think it will be quite effective. I work on UK assessment, or the assessment of impacts from offshore activities in UK waters. And I have to say, if any of the UK regulators would have to jump through the hurdles or jump over the hurdles, you don't jump through hurdles, that are set to the contractors, I think they would scream in disgust. So I actually think the regulation is quite comprehensive. And don't forget, it has to be, what is the wording? Suitable, flexible, to allow for countries to give it their own particular meaning. Shall I go on to the second question? Yeah, okay. How should the thresholds be best identified to ensure relative equality? I think those two things don't really go together, in my view. The thresholds have nothing to do with a particular country. As I explained before, they'll be more dependent on which resource, which ecosystem, and which license area. Because these license area, when we talk about, nodule mining, we talk of license areas of up to 75,000 square kilometers. So you have many different ecosystems in there. So that has nothing to do with who is the contractor, who is the sponsoring state. So that obviously doesn't answer the question as such. Thresholds, yes, they will be flexible. They have to be flexible. that is part of adaptive management, because if we put things in stone, that means that future knowledge cannot be used then to update any regulation or any threshold. So they have to be flexible. They have to be adapted with incoming new knowledge.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions. And I'll continue building. I agree with everything that was said. So I'll just continue building on that first. With respect to effectiveness, it's difficult to prejudge of something that has not been adopted yet. However, we're learning from the gaps and deficiencies of the exploration regulations, and the deficiencies in compliance precisely with those in terms of, in particular, data availability. And there is much emphasis in the context of the current negotiations for exploitation on monitoring, inspection, and compliance. It is not an easy topic. There's much disagreement on what should be within there. However, it is a key question. And so what is certainly the intention of a large number is to try to develop an effective set of regulations for exploitation. On the thresholds, I would like to add something else, which is that indeed it is situation dependent and ecosystem specific. Also, I mean, we have to realize it's a question of acceptability of harm, right? At one moment, is it pollution? At one moment, does it become significant? And what may be considered okay at one time in terms of quantity of input or effect will not be later in the future. So you have to think in terms of cumulative impact. You have to think in terms of different level of scientific knowledge. And so the notion of flexibility seems critical and certainly not a hard list of numbers. The way to think by analogy, looking at other parts of the marine environment where such mechanisms have been developed or are being developed and improved with time, is suites of indicators and constant monitoring and assessment in order to revise the rules. And that flexibility, which we always talk about in the context of iterative management, sounds great on paper. It's a lot harder to put in practice. However, this is really what is in the mind of everyone. And when looking at exploiting a part of the seabed, which has been untouched directly until now, it is certainly critical because it's a very big responsibilities that's on our shoulders.
Okay, thank you. So I give back first to Dieter, and Professor Ha, would you like to also comment to any of the questions afterwards? Yeah, so Dieter first. No, Dieter is first. Sorry.
No, it's just that it got me to think more about Dr. Hasman's question. And then because the whole conversations about the lack of information and then evidence about impact, on our environment also got me thinking maybe the status quo, no mining or no deep sea mining or no decision on whether there's ABNG or not in South China Sea, maybe a good thing for the environment. Not sure. But maybe it will also give us time to ponder about it more. But then I think if more data information are available, basically providing evidence that there are huge mineral resources in the South China Sea, let's say, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I think depending on, your point of view, maybe from the point of view of economic interests. And then, we know that, deep sea mining requires a high investment, and then private actors would not invest in such a risky project without, any clear legal or jurisdictional entitlement over an area. So maybe that could, I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe that would encourage claimant states to cooperate politically to resolve disputes. One possibility. I'm just a humble lawyer here, but many scenarios could happen, and depending on how you look at it, it could be good, could be bad, but that's what I have in mind at the moment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ha.
Just I would like to provide some more information about what is we are developing for the threshold. We divide it to three different subjects. One we consider about the turbidity, like sediment rate, and the other one is noise and light under contractor, and another one is the toxicity to harm ecology system or biology organisms. Actually, noise, but actually we noticed that threshold cannot identify one by one because it's the collaboration in the same environment. So sometimes we consider maybe we make all the data. That is why I say to you that still very few data, or not enough data to give any identical threshold in the deep sea mining area. Yes. But however, we try to accumulate data by request contractor to provide for the next coming years. That's all. Thank you.
We started 10 minutes late with our panel. We now extended our allocated time by 10 minutes. We should have started our lunch in 10 minutes ago already. And the next keynote speaker session after lunch will start already at 1:30. So unfortunately, I saw Dr. Revatka from the National University of Singapore also wanted to ask a question, but I would say we continue the discussion over lunch and maybe also in the further Q&A sessions for the next panels in the afternoon. Maybe you can bring up some of those questions. For now, I think we close here the morning session and we move on towards lunch. But before we do that, please join me in a round of applause for our 4 excellent all-female panelists.
Thank you very much, our panelists. And with that, we conclude the morning session of the 13th Ocean Dialogue. Now, may I invite our panelists participants to join us for lunch at Mekong Restaurant, the first floor, Sheraton, Cần Thơ. We will come back at 1:30 p.m. for the upcoming session. Online audience, we hope to see you again at 1:30 p.m. Thank you.